Welcome aboard, friends. You're now tuned into Arcane Paradox. We're super excited to share today's story with you. What if Griphook performed secret inheritance test on Harry and found he owns 60% of Hogwarts including Dumbledore's office? If you enjoy what we do here, the best way to support us is by liking, commenting, and subscribing. We read every comment. Ready? Let's go. Chapter 1, Inheritance Unearthed. The summer heat pressed down on Privet Drive like a physical weight. Harry Potter lay on his back in the parched grass of his aunt and uncle's garden, partially hidden by a hydrangea bush. Above him, the cloudless sky offered no respite from the sun, but he preferred the discomfort outside to the stifling atmosphere within number 4. With his eyes closed, he could almost pretend he was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere where Cedric Diggory's lifeless eyes didn't haunt his dreams. Somewhere where Voldemort's high, cold voice didn't echo in his mind with terrible clarity. Somewhere where the Daily Prophet wasn't printing daily insinuations that he was delusional, attention-seeking, or dangerous. A sharp tap against his forehead broke his reverie. Harry's eyes flew open to find a severe-looking tawny owl staring down at him with unmistakable impatience. Its leg bore a thick envelope sealed with gold wax, stamped with an ornate G. "Sorry," Harry muttered, fumbling for the letter. The owl gave an irritated hoot as Harry finally freed the envelope from its leg. Instead of flying off immediately, it settled on a nearby branch, clearly expecting a response. The parchment was thick and cream-colored, distinctly different from the ministry's official correspondence or his friend's letters. The seal broke with a soft crack, revealing elegant, slanting script in black ink: Mr. Harry James Potter, smallest bedroom 4, Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey. Dear Mr. Potter, your presence is required at Gringotts Wizarding Bank for a matter of account regularization and inheritance verification. This is a standard procedure for wizarding heirs approaching their 15th birthday. Please present yourself at Gringotts on July 31st at precisely 9 a.m. Ask for account manager Griphook at the inheritance office. This matter cannot be postponed or delegated. May your gold always flow, not Claw. Senior Inheritance Director, Gringotts Wizarding Bank. Harry read the letter twice, then a third time. His birthday was only 3 days away. How was he supposed to get to Diagon Alley? The Order members watching the house wouldn't let him wander off to London alone, not with Voldemort returned. As if sensing his thoughts, the owl gave an impatient click of its beak and extended its leg again, revealing a second, smaller envelope he hadn't noticed. This one contained just a short note: transport arrangements have been made. A representative will arrive at 8 a.m. on the appointed day. No response required. Harry frowned. The letter mentioned inheritance verification. What inheritance? He had his parents' vault, but surely there couldn't be anything else requiring his presence. And who exactly had made these arrangements? The owl, apparently satisfied that he'd read both messages, spread its impressive wings and departed without waiting for a reply. Harry remained under the hydrangea bush, letter clutched in his hand, with a strange feeling building in his chest. It wasn't quite anticipation or dread, something in between. After weeks of being kept in the dark about everything important, this direct summons felt oddly refreshing, even if it was just about bank accounts. He folded the letter carefully and tucked it into his pocket. 3 more days of summer purgatory, then he'd finally have something to do besides dodging Dudley and scanning the Muggle news for mysterious deaths. The representative turned out to be Remus Lupin, who arrived precisely at 8 o'clock on the morning of Harry's birthday, dressed in a Muggle suit that had seen better days but made him look surprisingly respectable. "Happy birthday, Harry," he said with a warm smile, once they were safely in the back of a ministry car with privacy charms in place. "I wish the circumstances allowed for proper celebrations." "This is already better than staying at the Dursleys," Harry replied truthfully. "But I'm confused. I thought I wasn't supposed to leave Privet Drive. Dumbledore's orders and all that." Lupin's expression tightened slightly. "Gringotts summons supersede almost everything in our world, Harry. Their neutrality and sovereignty are cornerstones of wizarding economy. When they issue a formal inheritance verification, even Albus can't interfere. But what inheritance? I thought I already had access to my parents' vault. Your trust vault, Lupin corrected. That's just a portion set aside for your schooling. The Potter family vault would normally become accessible when you come of age at 17, but... He hesitated. Sometimes magical inheritances have their own timing. Harry sensed Lupin wasn't telling him everything, but before he could press further, the car slowed as they entered Charing Cross Road. I should warn you, Lupin said quietly, the Prophet's campaign has been effective. People may stare or whisper. Keep your head high and remember who you are. Harry nodded grimly. The last few Prophet headlines had been particularly vicious, painting him as either deranged or dangerous. The leaky cauldron was mercifully quiet at this hour. Tom the barkeep gave Harry a nervous smile and a quick, "Happy birthday, Mr. Potter," before returning to wiping down glasses with studious intensity. The few early patrons either stared openly or pointedly avoided looking at him. Diagon Alley itself was subdued compared to Harry's previous visits. The normal bustle and energy seemed dimmed, though whether from the early hour or the unacknowledged shadow of Voldemort's return, Harry couldn't tell. Gringotts stood imposing as ever, its snowy white facade gleaming in the morning sunlight. The goblin guards at the burnished bronze doors watched them with particular intensity as they passed. Inside the vast marble hall, Lupin guided Harry past the main counters to a discreet side corridor Harry had never noticed before, lined with doors bearing golden nameplates. They stopped before one labeled, Inheritance Office, Private Consultations. I'll wait here, Lupin said. Goblins are particular about inheritance matters being private. Harry gave him a questioning look, but Lupin just squeezed his shoulder encouragingly. It's routine, Harry. Nothing to worry about. Somehow, that didn't feel entirely truthful either. Taking a deep breath, Harry knocked on the polished door. It swung open silently, revealing a surprisingly comfortable office. Unlike the grand, intimidating main hall, this room featured rich wood paneling, a plush carpet, and two comfortable chairs before a large desk. Behind it sat a familiar goblin. Mr. Potter, said Griphook with a slight incline of his head. Punctual. Good. Please be seated. Harry took one of the chairs, somewhat surprised to recognize the goblin who had first taken him to his vault 4 years ago. Hello, Griphook. I didn't expect to see you again. The goblin's eyes widened fractionally. You remember my name? Of course, Harry replied, confused by the question. Griphook studied him for a long moment. Interesting. Very few wizards bother learning goblin names, even those they interact with regularly. He straightened some papers on his desk. I have been assigned as your account manager following certain indicators in our magical detection systems. Indicators? Harry repeated. What does that mean exactly? It means, Mr. Potter, that Gringotts magic has identified potential unclaimed inheritances connected to you. Griphook folded his long fingers together. As you approach your 15th birthday, certain ancient magics begin to recognize your magical maturity. Our detectors sensed unusual activity around your magical signature. Harry shifted uncomfortably. Is this about my parents' vault? I thought I couldn't access that until I was 17. This goes beyond the Potter family vault, Mr. Potter. Griphook reached into a drawer and withdrew a small wooden box inlaid with silver. What I am about to propose is an inheritance revelation test. It is not performed routinely, only when our magic detects significant unclaimed legacies. What does it involve? Harry asked, eyeing the box warily. 7 drops of blood on a specially prepared parchment. The magic in the parchment interacts with the inherent magic in your blood to reveal all legitimate claims of inheritance. Harry hesitated. Blood magic? All inheritance magic is blood magic at its core, Mr. Potter. It is one of the few forms still practiced openly, as it falls under ancestral rights protected by our oldest treaties. Griphook's expression sharpened. I should note that this test is entirely voluntary, though declining would leave any potential inheritances unclaimed and potentially vulnerable. Something in the goblin's tone made Harry think there was more at stake than he was letting on. If I agree to this test, what exactly might it reveal? Properties, vaults, titles, artifacts, anything that rightfully belongs to you through blood, magic, or legal designation. Griphook paused. In rare cases, it may also reveal unexpected bloodline connections. Harry thought of his parents, of the family he'd never known. What might this test tell him about his ancestry? About who he really was? After a lifetime of having his history kept from him, the temptation to discover something, anything, about his family was too strong to resist. "All right," he said. "I'll do it." Griphook nodded, seemingly pleased, and opened the wooden box. Inside lay a gleaming silver dagger with a crystal handle and a piece of parchment that seemed to shimmer slightly in the light. "Your non-dominant hand, please," Griphook instructed. Harry extended his right hand. The goblin took it with surprising gentleness, positioning it over the parchment. With practiced precision, Griphook pricked Harry's index finger with the dagger's tip. The pain was sharp but brief. 7 drops of blood fell onto the center of the parchment, each one seeming to disappear on contact. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, thin lines of red began spreading outward from the center, branching and connecting like veins, forming words and symbols across the parchment surface. Griphook's eyes widened as he watched the process, his composure slipping for the first time. "Remarkable," the goblin murmured. "Truly unprecedented. What is it?" Harry leaned forward, trying to decipher the complex patterns forming on the parchment. Griphook didn't answer immediately. The red lines continued to spread until they reached the edges of the parchment, forming an intricate web of names, dates, and symbols that Harry couldn't begin to interpret. Finally, when the parchment stopped changing, Griphook looked up at Harry with an expression that might have been respect. "Mr. Potter," he said carefully, "you appear to be the hereditary owner of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, or at least, 60% of it." Harry stared at him. "That's not possible. I assure you, the inheritance revelation test cannot be fooled." Griphook tapped the parchment with one long finger. "The magic confirms it. Through various convergences of bloodlines, you are the magical heir to 3 of Hogwarts' founders, Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, and Rowena Ravenclaw." "But, that can't be right," Harry protested. "I'm a half-blood. My mother was Muggle-born." "Muggle-born does not mean without magical ancestry, Mr. Potter. It merely means magic has remained dormant in a family line until reappearing. Your mother's lineage traces back, through many generations of non-magical individuals, to Helga Hufflepuff and, remarkably, also to Rowena Ravenclaw." Harry's mind reeled. "And Gryffindor?" "Through your father's line, as one might expect of a Potter." Griphook studied the parchment closely. The castle's ownership was originally divided equally among the 4 founders, with each holding 25%. Your inheritance combines Gryffindor's share through the Potter line, Hufflepuff's through your mother's maternal lineage, and Ravenclaw's through your mother's paternal ancestry. What about Slytherin's share?" Harry asked, thinking of the Chamber of Secrets and his second-year discovery of his Parseltongue abilities. "That appears to remain with Slytherin's heir." Griphook gave Harry a significant look. "I believe you may have encountered him." A chill ran through Harry. "Voldemort." The goblin flinched slightly at the name but nodded. "The remaining 40% is divided, 25% to Salazar Slytherin's heir, and 15% held in trust by the current Board of Governors, who were granted a minority stake by Helga Hufflepuff's daughter in the 12th century. Harry sat back, overwhelmed. "This is mad. If I'm really the heir to 3 founders, why hasn't anyone told me? Why didn't Dumbledore say anything?" "Interesting questions," Griphook replied with a faint smile that showed his pointed teeth. "Perhaps the headmaster was unaware. Or perhaps he had reasons for keeping this information from you." Harry's thoughts raced. All the times Dumbledore had kept him in the dark, all the secrets withheld, for his own good, could this be another? What exactly does owning Hogwarts mean? He asked finally. That, Mr. Potter, is where matters become truly interesting. Griphook withdrew a thick folder from a drawer. Hogwarts is not merely a building. It is a magical entity unto itself, enchanted by the founders to serve specific purposes. As majority owner, you have rights and abilities that supersede the current administrative structure. Like what? Control of the wards. Access to all areas of the castle, including founders' private chambers unknown to current staff. The ability to override any enchantment within the grounds. Authority over staffing and curriculum. And, yes, Griphook's smile widened slightly, legal ownership of the headmaster's office and quarters. Harry tried to imagine telling Dumbledore that he technically owned his office. The thought was both terrifying and strangely satisfying after a summer of being ignored. "Can I decline this inheritance?" he asked hesitantly. Griphook's expression turned serious. "You could attempt to, Mr. Potter, but founder magic is not easily refused. The castle has recognized you. It would continue seeking connection with you regardless." "What do you mean, the castle has recognized me?" "Hogwarts is semi-sentient, Mr. Potter. The founders poured their magic into its very stones. It has been operating at minimal capacity for centuries without a true heir's guidance. Your connection to 3 founders makes you uniquely qualified to awaken aspects of Hogwarts that have lain dormant for generations." Harry thought about his time at Hogwarts, how the castle had always felt like home from the moment he'd first seen it. Had that been more than just his longing to belong somewhere? "What do I need to do?" he asked finally. "First, you must formally accept your inheritance." Griphook produced another document. "This acknowledgement allows Gringotts to manage the financial aspects of your ownership and provides official recognition of your status." Harry hesitated, quill poised over the parchment. "Before I sign anything, I need to know why you're telling me this now. Why right before my 5th year?" An astute question. Griphook nodded approvingly. 15 is a significant age in magical inheritance law. It marks the point when hereditary magic begins to recognize an heir as potentially capable of assuming their duties, though full legal control typically awaits 17. However, in cases of founder bloodlines, the magic itself makes the determination. "And the magic has decided I'm ready?" Harry asked skeptically. "The magic has decided you are needed," Griphook corrected. "Hogwarts calls to its heir most strongly in times of crisis or significant change. That the inheritance has activated now suggests the castle perceives such a time approaching." Harry thought of Voldemort's return, of the Ministry's denial, of the strange disconnect in Dumbledore's behavior. Crisis indeed. With a deep breath, he signed the acknowledgement. The parchment glowed briefly, and Harry felt a strange warmth spread through him, as if he'd just stepped into a familiar room after being away too long. "It is done," Griphook said solemnly. "Magically, you are now recognized as Lord Potter Gryffindor Hufflepuff Ravenclaw, hereditary owner of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry." "Please don't call me that," Harry said quickly. The goblin's lips twitched. "As you wish, Mr. Potter. However, others may not be so accommodating. Titles carry weight in the wizarding world." "So what happens now?" Harry asked, feeling strangely calm despite the enormity of what had just occurred. "Now, Mr. Potter, the interesting part begins." Griphook handed him a small golden key, different from his vault key. "This will allow you access to the Founder's Vault, which contains certain artifacts meant only for Hogwarts' rightful owner. I suggest you visit it before you leave today." Griphook paused, then added, "I should also warn you that news of this magnitude cannot remain secret for long. Gringotts will maintain confidentiality as required by our laws, but the castle's magic itself will announce your status when you return to Hogwarts." "Brilliant," Harry muttered. "Just what I need, more reasons for people to stare at me." "Indeed." Griphook gathered the inheritance documents into a folder and handed it to Harry. "You would be wise to study these thoroughly, Mr. Potter. Knowledge is particularly valuable when one suddenly acquires power. Harry accepted the folder, still struggling to process everything. Thank you, Griphook, for explaining all this. The goblin looked faintly surprised again. You are welcome, Mr. Potter. It has been unusually refreshing to conduct business with you. As Harry stood to leave, Griphook added, one final thing. The Founder's Vault is number 7. Simply present this key to Gornick at the main counter, and he will escort you. Harry nodded and turned toward the door, his mind still reeling. Oh, and Mr. Potter? Griphook called after him. Harry looked back. Happy birthday. Remus Lupin took one look at Harry's face as he emerged from the inheritance office and straightened from where he'd been leaning against the marble wall. That bad? He asked quietly. Harry just shook his head, not trusting himself to speak in the busy corridor. I need to visit a vault first, he managed after a moment. Then we need to talk. Somewhere private. Lupin's concerned expression deepened, but he nodded. Lead the way. At the main counter, Harry presented the golden key to a goblin who must have been Gornick. The goblin's eyes widened fractionally before he recovered his composure and called for a cart. The journey to Vault 7 was the longest and deepest Harry had experienced at Gringotts. They descended past the ordinary vaults, past even the high-security section where Harry had once seen a dragon, into ancient tunnels where the track appeared to be carved directly from the living rock. When they finally stopped, Harry found himself before a vault door unlike any he'd seen before. No keyhole was visible, just an ornate door divided into 4 quarters, each bearing the emblem of a Hogwarts house. Place the key against the door, Mr. Potter, Gornick instructed. Harry did so. The key seemed to melt into the door, which then split along its quartered sections and receded into the walls, revealing a chamber that took Harry's breath away. Unlike the piles of gold in his trust vault, this room contained carefully arranged artifacts on pedestals, shelves of ancient books, and 4 distinct areas that clearly represented each founder. 3 of the areas, marked by Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, and Ravenclaw's emblems, glowed with welcoming light, while the Slytherin quarter remained in shadow. I'll wait with the cart, Gornick said, remaining outside as Harry and Lupin entered cautiously. What is this place? Lupin whispered, his scholarly interest evident despite his confusion. The Founder's Vault, Harry replied. Apparently, I own it. Or most of it, anyway. He crossed to the Gryffindor section first, drawn to a glass case containing a familiar-looking wand. A small plaque identified it as Godric Gryffindor's ceremonial wand, for use by the rightful heir in awakening Hogwarts' deepest magic. Beside it lay a simple gold ring bearing the Gryffindor crest and a small leather-bound journal. The Ravenclaw area held a delicate silver diadem, not the lost diadem of legend, but a smaller ceremonial piece, along with extensive scrolls and a set of crystal vials containing swirling silver memories. In Hufflepuff's section, Harry found a small golden cup, again, not the famous relic, but similar, gardening tools that somehow still looked ready for use despite their obvious age, and a large book bound in yellow leather that seemed to hum with magic when Harry approached. Harry, Lupin said carefully, having examined a document in the Ravenclaw section, these items, they're for the awakening ceremony. According to this, it's a ritual performed by Hogwarts' hereditary owner to fully connect with the castle's magic. Griphook mentioned something about the castle being semi-sentient, Harry said, examining a curious silver instrument in Ravenclaw's collection that reminded him of the devices in Dumbledore's office. Semi-sentient is an understatement, according to this. Lupin held up the scroll he'd been reading. The Founders apparently imbued Hogwarts with a form of consciousness, a magical intelligence meant to assist and protect its students. But it requires a blood connection to the Founders to fully function. Harry moved to a central pedestal he hadn't noticed before, where a large book bound in all 4 house colors lay open. Its pages were blank, but as Harry reached toward it, words began forming on the parchment in elegant script. Greetings, heir of Hogwarts. The castle awaits your return. Harry yanked his hand back as if burned. The words faded slowly, leaving the page blank once more. I think I need to take some of these things with me, he said, looking around at the artifacts. But I don't know which ones. As if in response, 4 objects began to glow: the ceremonial wand from Gryffindor's section, Ravenclaw's small diadem, Hufflepuff's cup, and a silver ring from the central pedestal that Harry hadn't noticed before. I believe those are your answer, Lupin said quietly. Harry, what exactly happened in that inheritance meeting? Harry took a deep breath. Apparently, I'm the heir to 3 of Hogwarts' founders, and I legally own 60% of the school. Including Dumbledore's office. Lupin stared at him for a long moment, then closed his eyes briefly. Well, he said finally. That explains why James could always find his way around the castle so easily. You knew? Harry demanded. No, not specifically. But there were always rumors about the Potter family having founder blood. Lupin ran a hand through his graying hair. I never imagined it was this significant, though. Nor did I know about your mother's lineage. So Dumbledore must have known too, Harry said flatly. Lupin's silence was answer enough. Harry carefully collected the 4 glowing objects, which seemed to shrink to pocket size at his touch, along with the journal from Gryffindor's section and the yellow book from Hufflepuff's area. Everything fit neatly into a small pouch that had appeared on the central pedestal. I think we're done here, he said, his voice steadier than he felt. Outside the vault, the door sealed itself seamlessly behind them, and the golden key reappeared in Harry's pocket. The ride back to the surface was silent, both Harry and Lupin lost in their own thoughts. When they emerged into the marble hall, Lupin guided Harry to a quiet corner. We should go directly to Grimmauld Place, he said in a low voice. Dumbledore needs to be informed. Oh, I definitely plan to inform him, Harry replied, a hard edge to his voice that made Lupin look at him sharply. But first, I want lunch. Somewhere in Muggle London, where we can talk without being overheard or stared at. After a moment's hesitation, Lupin nodded. There's a cafe a few blocks away that should be suitable. As they walked through the leaky cauldron toward Muggle London, Harry felt the weight of the pouch against his chest where he'd tucked it under his shirt. The objects inside seemed to pulse with a gentle warmth, as if recognizing their proximity to their rightful owner. For the first time in weeks, Harry felt something other than grief and frustration. It wasn't quite happiness, the situation was too overwhelming for that, but perhaps a sense of purpose. Whatever came next, at least he wouldn't be powerless. The café Lupin chose was small and unremarkable, tucked away on a side street with just enough customers to provide background noise without risk of being overheard. They found a corner table, ordered sandwiches and tea, and sat in silence until their food arrived. Start at the beginning, Lupin said once they were alone again. Tell me exactly what Griphook said. Harry recounted the meeting as precisely as he could, watching Lupin's expression shift from surprise to concern to something approaching awe. 3 founders, Lupin murmured when Harry finished. No wonder the Potters have always had such an affinity for Hogwarts. And your mother? He shook his head slightly. Lily would have been fascinated by this. She loved magical theory, especially the idea that magic might select its own vessels regardless of so-called blood status. But why didn't anyone tell me? Harry demanded, keeping his voice low despite his frustration. This isn't some small detail, Remus. This is huge. It changes everything about who I am. Does it? Lupin asked gently. You're still Harry. This inheritance reveals something about your ancestry, yes, but it doesn't change who you've become or the choices you've made. Harry knew Lupin was trying to be reassuring, but it didn't address the fundamental issue. That's not the point. It's about people, especially Dumbledore, deciding what I should and shouldn't know about my own life. Again. Lupin sighed. I can't defend what I don't understand myself, Harry. I genuinely don't believe Dumbledore knew the full extent of this inheritance. He might have suspected a connection to Gryffindor through James, but your mother's lineage would have been impossible to trace without the Gringotts test. Or he did know and kept it from me, like he's kept everything else, Harry countered. He knew about the prophecy for 14 years and never told me. Why would this be different? Lupin had no answer for that. They ate in silence for a while, Harry trying to organize his thoughts about everything he'd learned. Finally, he asked the question that had been nagging at him since leaving Gringotts. What am I supposed to do with this, Remus? I can barely manage being just Harry Potter. How am I supposed to handle being the heir to Hogwarts? Lupin considered this carefully before responding. I think you're looking at it from the wrong angle, he said finally. This inheritance isn't another burden, it's a resource. You've always had a connection to Hogwarts, Harry. Now you understand why, and you have the legal authority to protect the school if necessary. Protect it from what? From interference, perhaps. Lupin lowered his voice further. The Ministry has been applying pressure to Dumbledore about Hogwarts curriculum and staffing. With Fudge refusing to acknowledge Voldemort's return, there have been rumors about the Ministry placing someone at Hogwarts to monitor the situation. Harry thought about the folder of documents Griphook had given him, still untouched in his bag. So I could prevent that? As the owner? Legally, yes, though exercising such power would be politically complicated. Lupin paused. Harry, I need to ask, what do you intend to do when we see Dumbledore today? Harry considered the question. Part of him wanted to storm in and demand explanations, to challenge Dumbledore with the same cold distance the headmaster had shown him all summer. But another part recognized that antagonizing Dumbledore would achieve little. I need answers, he said finally. Real ones, not half-truths, or, when you're older, deflections. If he won't give them, then. He trailed off, not entirely sure what he would do. Then you'll make your own decisions, Lupin finished for him. Which is your right. Just remember that Albus, for all his secrecy, cares deeply about both you and Hogwarts. Caring isn't enough, Harry said quietly. Not anymore. They finished their meal and headed back toward the leaky cauldron, where they could safely apparate to Grimmauld Place. As they walked, Lupin placed a hand on Harry's shoulder. Whatever happens next, Harry, know that your parents would be immensely proud of you. James always said Hogwarts was where he felt most alive. I think he somehow sensed what you've discovered today. For the first time since leaving Gringotts, Harry smiled slightly. Thanks, Remus. Number 12, Grimmauld Place materialized between numbers 11 and 13 as Lupin whispered the address to Harry. The gloomy townhouse seemed even more forbidding in daylight, its windows like darkened eyes watching their approach. Remember, Lupin murmured as they reached the door, this information is sensitive. Until we've spoken with Dumbledore, I suggest keeping it between us. Harry nodded, though he fully intended to tell Ron and Hermione everything as soon as possible. Their counsel, Hermione's logical analysis and Ron's instinctive understanding of wizarding traditions, would be invaluable. The house was quieter than Harry expected. Mrs. Weasley emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, her face lighting up at the sight of him. Harry, dear. Happy birthday. She enveloped him in a warm hug that momentarily pushed aside his tumultuous thoughts. How was Gringotts? Just routine matters, I hope. Not exactly, Harry said, exchanging a glance with Lupin. Is Dumbledore here? Lupin asked before Mrs. Weasley could inquire further. In the library with Sirius, she replied, her expression turning curious. Is everything all right? We need to speak with them, Lupin said diplomatically. Harry's had some unexpected news. Concern immediately replaced curiosity on Mrs. Weasley's face. Nothing bad, I hope. Just complicated, Harry assured her. Is everyone else here too? Ron and Hermione are upstairs with Ginny and the twins. They've been cleaning out the drawing room all morning. She studied Harry's face carefully. Should I call them down? We were planning a small birthday tea for you later. Maybe after I've spoken with Dumbledore, Harry decided. The prospect of seeing his friends lifted his spirits, but he needed to handle the confrontation with Dumbledore first. "This way, Harry," Lupin said, leading him toward the library. The Black family library was an imposing room lined with glass-fronted bookcases containing volumes that looked ancient and, in many cases, sinister. Sirius and Dumbledore sat in worn leather armchairs by the fireplace, apparently deep in discussion that ceased abruptly when Harry and Lupin entered. "Harry." Sirius rose immediately, crossing to embrace his godson. "Happy birthday. How was Gringotts?" Enlightening, Harry replied, his eyes fixed on Dumbledore, who had remained seated. The headmaster looked the same as always, resplendent in midnight blue robes scattered with silver stars, his long white beard neatly tucked into his belt, his half-moon spectacles perched on his crooked nose. What was different, Harry realized with a jolt, was that Dumbledore was actually looking at him directly for the first time all summer. "I gather your appointment was not the routine matter we anticipated," Dumbledore said calmly. "No, Professor, it wasn't," Harry replied, struggling to keep his voice steady. "I found out I'm the heir to 3 of Hogwarts founders and that I legally own 60% of the school. Including your office." A heavy silence fell over the room. Sirius looked between Harry and Dumbledore with increasing confusion, while Lupin moved to stand supportively beside Harry. Dumbledore's expression remained impassive for several long moments. Then, to Harry's surprise, he sighed deeply and removed his spectacles to pinch the bridge of his nose. "I see," he said finally. "I had wondered if this day might come, though I confess I did not expect it so soon." The quiet admission sent a surge of anger through Harry. "So you did know?" "Not with certainty," Dumbledore replaced his spectacles. "I suspected your father's family had ties to Godric Gryffindor. Many old wizarding families claim such connections, though few can prove them. As for your mother's lineage..." He shook his head slightly. "That I did not anticipate." "Hang on," Sirius interrupted, looking thunderstruck. "Harry owns Hogwarts? And Lily was descended from founders too? Why am I just hearing about this?" "Because," Harry said before Dumbledore could respond, "apparently it's standard procedure to keep me in the dark about my own life." He turned back to Dumbledore. "Why didn't you tell me what you suspected? Why do I always have to find these things out from someone else?" Something flashed in Dumbledore's eyes, regret, perhaps, or resignation. "I had my reasons, Harry, though I recognize now they may have been insufficient." "Not good enough," Harry said flatly. "I want real answers. Now." Sirius moved to stand beside Harry, his posture making it clear whose side he was on in this confrontation. "I'd like to hear these reasons too, Albus." Dumbledore looked at the 3 of them, Harry flanked by Sirius and Lupin like guards, and nodded slowly. "Very well. Please, sit down. This may take some time." Harry reluctantly took a seat opposite Dumbledore, while Sirius and Lupin positioned themselves on either side of him. "I first suspected your father might have founder blood when I observed his extraordinary affinity for Hogwarts Castle during his school years," Dumbledore began. "James Potter could navigate the castle's secrets with unusual ease, finding passageways that had been lost for generations, instinctively understanding aspects of Hogwarts magic that should have been beyond a student's comprehension." "The map," Sirius said suddenly. "Merlin's beard, that's why the map worked so well. We thought it was just clever spell work, but if James had a connection to the castle itself." Dumbledore nodded. "Indeed. However, suspicion is not proof, and the Potters themselves had no documented evidence of founder lineage. I chose not to pursue the matter, particularly as Voldemort was actively targeting families with connections to the founders during the First War." "Why would he do that?" Harry asked. "Because of a legend that Hogwarts' true heir would have power the Dark Lord knows not," Dumbledore said quietly. "Sound familiar, Harry?" Harry stiffened. The wording was too close to the prophecy Dumbledore had finally revealed to him after Sirius's near death at the Department of Mysteries, a prophecy that had already cost him his parents. So you kept it quiet to protect me, Harry said, his anger cooling slightly. What about my mother's side? That, I genuinely did not suspect, Dumbledore admitted. Magical lineage through Muggle lines is nearly impossible to trace without goblin inheritance magic. The talent sometimes manifests generations later with no obvious connection. Griphook mentioned something about convergent bloodlines, Harry said. That I somehow inherited from 3 founders through different lines that came together. A magical miracle of sorts, Dumbledore agreed. Such convergences are exceedingly rare, which explains the strength of your connection to Hogwarts. He leaned forward slightly. May I ask what exactly the inheritance test revealed, Harry? Harry described the contents of the Founder's vault and the strange book that had written to him, watching Dumbledore's expression grow increasingly grave. The awakening ceremony, the headmaster murmured. It hasn't been performed in over 6 centuries. What exactly does it do? Harry asked. It fully connects the heir to Hogwarts' sentient magic, essentially waking up the castle to its full potential. Dumbledore's gaze turned distant. Hogwarts was designed to be more than a school, Harry. It was meant to be a living repository of magical knowledge, capable of adapting to protect and nurture each generation of students according to their needs. But something went wrong, Harry guessed. Not wrong, precisely. Without a recognized heir, the castle's deeper magic gradually became dormant. Headmasters and headmistresses have acted as stewards, but we cannot access Hogwarts' full capabilities. Only the blood heir can do that. Sirius let out a low whistle. No wonder you didn't tell him, Albus. Can you imagine what the Ministry would do if they knew Harry could control Hogwarts magic? Especially now, when they're calling him disturbed and dangerous. Precisely my concern, Dumbledore agreed. Which brings us to our current dilemma. What dilemma? Harry asked. Whether to publicly acknowledge your inheritance before you return to Hogwarts, or to allow the castle's magic to reveal it naturally when you arrive. Dumbledore steepled his fingers. Each approach carries significant risks. I don't see that I have much choice, Harry said. Griphook said the castle will announce it anyway once I'm there. Yes, but how we prepare for that announcement could make a considerable difference in how it is received. Dumbledore's blue eyes were keen behind his spectacles. Harry, I must ask, now that you know of this inheritance, what do you intend to do with it? The question caught Harry off guard. He hadn't thought that far ahead, too busy processing the revelation itself. I don't know exactly, he admitted. Make sure Hogwarts is safe, I suppose. Especially with Voldemort back. A worthy priority, Dumbledore nodded. And what of the current administration? Do you intend to assert your ownership rights over, say, my position as headmaster? Harry recognized the real question beneath the calm inquiry. Was Harry planning to use his newfound authority against Dumbledore himself? I'm not interested in taking your job, Professor, Harry said carefully. But I am interested in knowing what's happening at my school. No more secrets, no more being kept in the dark for my own good. If I legally own Hogwarts, then I deserve to be involved in decisions that affect it. Something that might have been relief flickered across Dumbledore's face. A reasonable position. Perhaps we can reach an accommodation that respects both your inheritance rights and the practical needs of school administration. Perhaps, Harry agreed, not fully committing. But first, I need to understand exactly what these rights are. He withdrew the folder Griphook had given him and placed it on the small table between them. I haven't had time to read through all of this yet. May I? Dumbledore gestured toward the folder. After a moment's hesitation, Harry pushed it across to him. The headmaster opened it and began scanning the contents, his expression growing more thoughtful with each page. Fascinating, he murmured eventually. The legal framework is more comprehensive than I realized. According to this, as majority owner, you have final authority over Hogwarts grounds, curriculum, staffing, and security measures. So Harry could, hypothetically, prevent ministry interference at Hogwarts. Sirius asked, leaning forward eagerly. Hypothetically, yes, though exercising such authority would undoubtedly provoke significant political backlash. Dumbledore looked up at Harry. The Ministry will not surrender influence easily, especially to someone they are currently attempting to discredit. I'm not afraid of the Ministry, Harry said firmly. Perhaps you should be, Dumbledore countered gently. Not out of fear for yourself, but for the consequences your actions might have for others. Political battles often claim unexpected casualties. Harry thought of his friends, of the other students at Hogwarts who might be caught in the crossfire of any conflict between him and the Ministry. What do you suggest, then? He asked, somewhat grudgingly. A measured approach. Allow me to announce your inheritance status at the start of term feast, framing it as a historical curiosity rather than a transfer of authority. Meanwhile, you begin learning what it means to be Hogwarts heir, studying the Founder's journals, exploring the castle's secrets, understanding the magic that is now yours to steward. And if the Ministry tries to interfere anyway? Then we reassess, Dumbledore said simply. Your legal rights remain, regardless of how gradually we choose to assert them. It was a reasonable suggestion, Harry had to admit. Charging in without fully understanding his position would be foolish, especially with Voldemort lurking in the background. All right, he said finally. But I have conditions. I expected nothing less, Dumbledore replied with the faintest hint of a smile. First, no more secrets about my life or my family. Anything you know that I should know, you tell me, not when you think I'm ready, but now. Harry held Dumbledore's gaze steadily. Second, I want regular meetings with you at Hogwarts to discuss both the school and Voldemort. If I'm going to face him eventually, I need to be prepared. Both reasonable requests, Dumbledore nodded. Anything else? Harry hesitated, then added, I want to see the Founder's private chambers at Hogwarts as soon as we return. Griphook mentioned them, and if they contain information about the castle's magic, I need to know. That can be arranged, Dumbledore agreed. Though I should warn you that I myself have never been able to access them. They may reveal themselves only to you. The thought sent a strange thrill through Harry, spaces in his beloved Hogwarts that even Dumbledore hadn't seen. I'd like to tell Ron and Hermione, Harry added. And Sirius and Remus already know, obviously. A small circle of trust is wise, Dumbledore conceded. Though I would caution against spreading the information too widely before term begins. Harry nodded, feeling some of the tension drain from his shoulders. For once, he'd confronted Dumbledore directly and secured actual commitments rather than vague reassurances. Well, that's settled then, Sirius said, clapping Harry on the shoulder. My godson, the owner of Hogwarts. James would be absolutely beside himself with pride. And Lily would be researching everything she could about Founder magic, Lupin added with a smile. Dumbledore rose from his chair, returning the folder to Harry. I believe Mrs. Weasley mentioned a birthday tea. We shouldn't keep her waiting. He paused, looking down at Harry with an expression that seemed, for the first time in months, genuinely warm. Happy birthday, Harry. I believe this year at Hogwarts will be quite unlike any you've experienced before. As they left the library, Harry felt the pouch of Founder artifacts warm against his chest again. The strange book's message echoed in his mind. The castle awaits your return. For the first time all summer, he found himself genuinely looking forward to going back to school. Harry's birthday tea was a subdued affair compared to the revelations of the day, but the normalcy of being surrounded by friends was exactly what he needed. Mrs. Weasley had prepared his favorite treacle tart, the twins provided entertainment with their latest inventions, and for a few hours, Harry could almost forget the weight of his new discovery. Almost, but not quite. The Founder artifacts in their pouch seemed to pulse occasionally against his chest, as if reminding him of their presence. After cake and presents, Harry managed to pull Ron and Hermione aside to the relative privacy of the drawing room, which had been recently purged of doxies and other magical pests. Something happened at Gringotts, he told them without preamble. Something big. Ron and Hermione exchanged worried glances. Is it about you-know-who? Hermione asked anxiously. No, it's about me. And Hogwarts. Harry took a deep breath. Apparently, I'm the heir to 3 of the founders, and I legally own 60% of the school. The stunned silence that followed was almost comical. Ron's mouth fell open, while Hermione's eyes widened to the point where they seemed likely to pop out of her head. You, what? Ron finally managed. It's true. Gringotts did an inheritance test. I'm descended from Gryffindor through my dad, and from Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw through my mum. But that's incredible. Hermione breathed. The statistical probability of 3 founder bloodlines converging in one person must be astronomically small. Leave it to Hermione to think about statistics, Ron muttered, then turned to Harry with growing excitement. Mate, do you realize what this means? You literally own Hogwarts. You could change the rules, cancel exams, Ronald. Hermione interrupted, scandalized. I'm joking. Mostly, Ron added with a grin. But seriously, Harry, this is massive. No wonder the Ministry's been trying to discredit you. If people knew you had this kind of claim to Hogwarts. They don't know, Harry clarified. Not yet, anyway. Dumbledore thinks we should keep it quiet until term starts, then announce it as a historical curiosity rather than a transfer of power. That makes sense, Hermione nodded thoughtfully. The political ramifications otherwise could be enormous. The educational system is one of the Ministry's key influences over wizarding society. Exactly what Dumbledore said, Harry confirmed. But the castle itself will apparently announce it somehow when I return, so we can't keep it secret forever. What does owning Hogwarts actually mean, though? Ron asked. Besides having your name on the deed or whatever. Harry explained what Griphook and Dumbledore had told him about the castle's sentient nature, the dormant magic, and the awakening ceremony. As he spoke, he withdrew the pouch from beneath his shirt and carefully removed the 4 glowing artifacts. Hermione gasped at the sight of them. Are those? Founder relics, yeah. Not the famous ones like Gryffindor's sword or Ravenclaw's diadem, but ceremonial objects meant specifically for the heir. Harry arranged them on a small table, the wand, the cup, the miniature diadem, and the silver ring. They're supposed to help me connect with the castle's magic. This is absolutely fascinating, Hermione whispered, leaning closer to examine the artifacts without touching them. There's hardly anything in the historical record about Hogwarts' sentient nature. Most scholars treat it as metaphorical rather than literal. Well, according to Griphook, it's definitely literal. The castle is alive in some way, and it's been waiting for an heir to fully awaken it. Ron shook his head in amazement. Only you, Harry. Seriously, only you could go to Gringotts for a routine visit and come back owning Hogwarts. Despite the gravity of the situation, Harry found himself smiling. Trust Ron to cut through the enormity of it all with simple truth. So what are you going to do? Hermione asked, her analytical mind already racing ahead. This could change everything about how Hogwarts is run. For now, I'm going to learn, Harry decided. About the founders, about the castle's magic, about what being the heir actually means in practice. Dumbledore's agreed to regular meetings and access to the founders' private chambers when we return. Chambers that even Dumbledore hasn't seen, Ron said appreciatively. Wicked. There's so much research we need to do, Hermione said, excitement building in her voice. The founders' original educational philosophy, the governance structure they intended, the purpose of Hogwarts beyond just being a school, breathe, Hermione, Ron interrupted with a fond smile. Term hasn't even started yet. Harry carefully returned the artifacts to their pouch. I have their journals too. Gryffindors and Hufflepuffs, at least. I thought we could go through them together. Absolutely, Hermione agreed eagerly. And we should cross-reference them with what's in the Hogwarts library. There might be mentions of the heir's role in Hogwarts, a history that I've overlooked. Shocking that there might be something in a book that Hermione hasn't memorized, Ron teased. Oh, be quiet, she replied without heat. This is important, Ron. If Harry's truly the heir to Hogwarts, it could change everything about our 5th year. It already has, Harry said quietly. I'm not just going back as a student anymore. I'm going back as the owner. The weight of that statement hung in the air between them. After a moment, Ron reached out and squeezed Harry's shoulder. Whatever happens, mate, we've got your back. Owner or not, you're still just Harry to us. Exactly, Hermione agreed warmly. Though I do have about 1,000 questions about the legal implications of your ownership status. Harry groaned, but it was good-natured. Some things never changed, and Hermione's thirst for knowledge was reassuringly constant in a suddenly shifting world. As his friends launched into a discussion about the possible consequences of his inheritance, Ron speculating wildly about canceling potions while Hermione cited wizarding property law, Harry felt the founder artifacts warm against his chest again. The castle awaits your return. Soon, Harry thought. And this time, Hogwarts would be more than just a school or a home. It would be his legacy. The remaining weeks at Grimmauld Place passed in a blur of preparation. Harry divided his time between studying the founder documents, practicing defensive magic with Ron and Hermione, and occasional strategic discussions with Dumbledore, who visited more frequently than before. The Gryffindor journal proved particularly fascinating, written in a bold hand that reminded Harry somewhat of Sirius. Godric had detailed not only the founding of Hogwarts but his vision for magical education, a vision surprisingly focused on practical application rather than theory. Listen to this, Harry told Ron and Hermione one rainy afternoon as they sat in the library. Magic must be lived, not merely studied. A student who can recite the 12 uses of dragon's blood but cannot cast a proper shield charm has learned nothing of value. Sounds like he'd approve of your teaching the DA, Ron remarked, referring to the defense group they had formed in response to Umbridge's theoretical approach. He probably wouldn't approve of the Ministry's entire educational approach, Hermione added, looking up from Hufflepuff's journal. According to Helga's notes here, the founders intended a much more individualized curriculum, with students progressing at their own pace rather than by arbitrary year divisions. The more Harry learned about the founders' original vision, the more he realized how far Hogwarts had drifted from its intended purpose. Standardized testing, ministry interference, rigid house divisions, none of these aligned with what Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, and Ravenclaw had wanted for their school. Even more intriguing were the references to Hogwarts' sentient nature. According to Ravenclaw's notes, which Hermione found referenced in the library, the castle had been designed to learn from each generation of students, adapting its magic to best serve their needs. That explains why the Room of Requirement works the way it does, Hermione exclaimed after reading the passage. It's not just an enchanted room, it's part of Hogwarts' consciousness responding to student needs. Meanwhile, Dumbledore provided Harry with information about the current political situation. As Lupin had warned, the Ministry was indeed planning to interfere at Hogwarts. Cornelius has appointed his senior undersecretary, Dolores Umbridge, as the new defense against the dark arts professor, Dumbledore explained during one of their meetings. Her real purpose, of course, is to monitor the school and prevent any discussion of Voldemort's return. Can't I just refuse to allow her appointment? Harry asked. If I owned the school, you could, Dumbledore acknowledged, but doing so would force a direct confrontation with the Ministry before you've even established your position. It might be wiser to allow her appointment while limiting her influence through other means. Harry reluctantly agreed, recognizing the political reality. Still, the thought of having a Ministry spy as a professor rankled. What about the Order? Harry asked, referring to the Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore's secret society fighting against Voldemort. How does my inheritance affect their operations? It potentially provides us with a secure headquarters beyond this house, Dumbledore replied. Hogwarts under the direct control of its heir would be even more secure than it currently is. However, we must move cautiously. Voldemort will undoubtedly learn of your status eventually, and it may make you an even more tempting target. The reminder of Voldemort sobered Harry. His inheritance wasn't just about school politics, it had implications for the coming war. The night before their return to Hogwarts, Harry couldn't sleep. He sat on the windowsill of the room he shared with Ron, looking out at the gloomy square below and turning the silver founder's ring over in his palm. The ring bore no house symbol, unlike the other artifacts. Instead, it featured a simple H surrounded by a circle of tiny runes that Harry couldn't decipher. When he slipped it onto his finger, it adjusted perfectly to his size and emitted a soft, golden glow before returning to normal. Somehow, the ring made everything more real. He wasn't just going back to school tomorrow, he was returning to a place that was, in some essential way, his. What would the other students think when they found out? Would they see it as just another special thing about Harry Potter, the boy who lived? Or would they understand that this inheritance came with responsibility rather than privilege? Can't sleep either. Ron's voice came quietly from his bed. Harry turned to see his friend sitting up, watching him with understanding. Just thinking about tomorrow, Harry admitted. Ron nodded. Big day. Not every student returns to Hogwarts as the landlord. Harry smiled despite himself. I'm not going to start charging rent. Shame. You could give the Slytherins a special rate. Ron grinned, then grew more serious. Are you worried? About how people will react? A bit, Harry admitted. It's just, one more thing that makes me different, you know. As if being the boy who lived wasn't enough. Look at it this way, Ron suggested. Being the boy who lived wasn't your choice, it happened to you. This inheritance thing, it's still not your choice exactly, but at least it's about who you are, not what happened to you. It's about your family, your blood. That's something to be proud of, not worried about. Harry looked at his friend with surprise. Sometimes Ron's emotional insight caught him off guard. Thanks, Ron, he said simply. Besides, Ron added with a yawn, lying back down, owning the castle has to have some perks. Maybe you can finally get rid of those moving staircases. Bloody nightmare when you're late for potions. Harry chuckled and returned to looking out the window, the ring warm in his palm. Tomorrow, Hogwarts would recognize its heir. Tomorrow, everything would change. Again. Platform 9 3/4 was its usual chaos of students, parents, pets, and luggage when the Weasleys, Harry, and Hermione arrived the next morning. Despite the familiar scene, Harry felt distinctly different as he pushed his trolley toward the gleaming Hogwarts Express. Conversations hushed momentarily as he passed, followed by furious whispers. The Daily Prophet summer campaign had clearly left its mark, students and parents alike were eyeing him with a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and in some cases, outright suspicion. Just ignore them, Hermione murmured beside him. They'll know the truth soon enough. Harry nodded, though the scrutiny still made him uncomfortable. The founder artifacts, safely tucked into the pouch beneath his shirt, seemed to warm in response to his discomfort, as if offering reassurance. They found a compartment toward the end of the train and settled in for the journey. Luna Lovegood and Neville Longbottom joined them shortly afterward, bringing welcome distractions with Luna's latest Quibbler theories and Neville's new Mimbulus Mimbletonia plant. As the train pulled away from the station, Harry felt a curious sensation, a gentle tugging in his chest, as if something were calling to him. The founder artifacts grew warmer, and the silver ring on his finger, which he had decided to wear, though it looked like an ordinary piece of jewelry to anyone else, pulsed once with magic. You all right, Harry? Neville asked, noticing his sudden distraction. Fine, Harry replied automatically. Just, thinking about getting back to Hogwarts. Luna looked at him with her protuberant eyes. You seem different, she observed dreamily. Like you found something you didn't know you lost. Harry exchanged quick glances with Ron and Hermione. Luna's intuition was uncanny sometimes. Maybe, he acknowledged carefully. It's been an interesting summer. The journey north intensified the strange pulling sensation. By the time Scottish mountains appeared outside their windows, Harry could almost feel the direction of Hogwarts, as if an invisible cord connected him to the ancient castle. When Draco Malfoy made his customary visit to their compartment to taunt Harry, the founder artifacts actually grew hot, as if responding to Harry's spike of irritation. "Careful, Potter," Malfoy drawled after exchanging the usual insults. "The Ministry's taking a special interest in Hogwarts this year. Your usual rule-breaking won't be tolerated." "Thanks for the warning," Harry replied evenly, conscious of the irony that Malfoy had no idea who really controlled Hogwarts now. As Malfoy swaggered away, Ron snorted. "Can't wait to see his face when he finds out you're his landlord." "We agreed to be subtle about it," Hermione reminded them. "At least until Professor Dumbledore makes the announcement." "Still going to be brilliant," Ron insisted. As darkness fell and the train began to slow for Hogsmeade Station, the pulling sensation in Harry's chest became almost overwhelming. The founder artifacts were now constantly warm against his skin, and the ring on his finger emitted a faint glow that he had to conceal by clenching his hand. "Harry?" Hermione touched his arm, concerned. "What's happening?" "It's Hogwarts," he whispered. "I can feel it. It knows I'm coming." When they stepped onto the platform at Hogsmeade, Harry had to steady himself against the side of the train. The magical connection was so strong now that he could almost see it, a golden thread stretching from his heart toward the castle on the hill. "Are you sure you're all right?" Neville asked, hovering nearby with obvious concern. "I'm fine," Harry assured him, straightening with effort. "Just excited to be back." They made their way to the thestral-drawn carriages, Harry now acutely aware of the skeletal horses that had been invisible to him before witnessing Cedric's death. As they climbed into a carriage, the usual view of Hogwarts Castle appeared above the trees, and Harry gasped audibly. The castle was glowing with golden light, visible only to him. Every tower, every window, every stone seemed to pulse with welcome. It was Hogwarts as he had never seen it before, not just a building but a living entity reaching out to him across the distance. "Do you see that?" he asked without thinking. "The light around the castle?" The others looked at him strangely, then back at Hogwarts, which to their eyes appeared as it always had, impressive but ordinary in the evening darkness. "What light, Harry?" Hermione asked carefully. "It's golden," Luna answered before Harry could. "Like sunshine trapped in stone. Very beautiful." She turned her dreamy gaze to Harry. "You can see it too?" Harry nodded, startled. "You can see it?" "Not exactly," Luna replied serenely. "But I can feel it. The castle is singing." Ron and Hermione exchanged worried glances, but Harry understood perfectly. The castle was singing, a wordless melody of welcome and recognition that vibrated through his very being. As their carriage approached the gates, Harry felt a sudden shift in the magic around him. The wards of Hogwarts, invisible barriers that protected the school from various threats, became tangible to his senses. He could feel the complex layers of enchantment, some ancient and powerful, others more recent and, he realized with surprise, somewhat flawed. When they passed through the gates onto Hogwarts grounds proper, the founder artifacts grew so hot that Harry had to stifle a gasp. The ring on his finger blazed with golden light that he could no longer conceal. "Harry!" Hermione hissed, noticing the glow emanating from his hand. "Your ring!" Before he could respond, a wave of magic washed over him, so powerful that for a moment he couldn't breathe. It felt like Hogwarts itself was embracing him, recognizing him, claiming him as its own. And then, to everyone's shock, the carriage stopped moving. Not just their carriage, all of them, all along the path to the castle. The Thestrals stood perfectly still, as if waiting. A hushed murmur spread through the students as they realized something unusual was happening. Heads turned, searching for the cause of the delay. And then it began. A single note, deep and resonant, echoed across the grounds, the great bell in Hogwarts' highest tower, which rang only on special occasions. It was followed by another, until all the castle's bells were ringing in a complex harmony that hadn't been heard for centuries. The stones of the castle itself began to glow, visible now to everyone. Golden light spread from the foundations upward, illuminating every tower, every window, every archway in brilliant welcome. Students gasped and pointed as the very magic of Hogwarts manifested before their eyes. The great doors of the entrance hall swung open of their own accord, sending a beam of golden light straight down the path to where Harry sat in his carriage. And then, words appeared in the air above the castle, formed from sparkling golden light. Hogwarts welcomes its heir. The message shimmered for all to see, unmistakable and impossible to ignore. Every eye turned to follow the beam of light directly to Harry's carriage. "Bloody hell," Ron whispered. So much for the subtle approach. The castle had made its choice. There would be no quiet announcement at the feast, no careful political framing. Hogwarts itself had proclaimed its heir to the world, and nothing would ever be the same again. As whispers erupted around them and students craned to see who sat in the illuminated carriage, Harry felt a strange calm settle over him. The time for hiding was over. He stood up in the carriage, the founder's ring blazing on his finger, and faced the castle that was now, irrevocably and publicly, his. Hogwarts had welcomed its heir. Now he had to prove worthy of the title. Chapter 2, Resistance and Revelation. The world seemed to hold its breath. Golden light bathed the grounds of Hogwarts as Harry stood in the carriage, the founder's ring blazing on his finger. Hundreds of eyes stared at him with expressions ranging from awe to suspicion to outright disbelief. The magical words above the castle continued to shimmer, "Hogwarts welcomes its heir." "Harry," Hermione whispered urgently, tugging at his robes, "maybe you should sit down." But Harry remained standing, transfixed by the castle's magic. The connection between him and Hogwarts hummed with energy, a living bond that seemed to strengthen with each passing second. He could feel the ancient stones, the centuries of magic layered within the walls, the very heart of the castle reaching out to him. A figure emerged from the castle's open doors, silhouetted against the golden glow. Even at this distance, the tall, thin shape of Albus Dumbledore was unmistakable. The headmaster stood at the top of the stone steps, surveying the extraordinary scene before him. As if responding to his presence, the magical light intensified, and the carriages began moving again. Harry sank back into his seat, suddenly aware of the hundreds of whispers spreading like wildfire among the students. "Did you see, Potter? How could it be Potter? What does it mean, the heir? My father always said the castle was sentient, has to be some kind of trick." Ron leaned close to Harry as their carriage resumed its journey toward the entrance. "Well, mate," Suttles officially out the window. "It wasn't me," Harry said, still stunned by what had happened. "The castle just decided. It appears Hogwarts has its own ideas about timing," Hermione observed, looking troubled. "This complicates everything." Luna, however, seemed perfectly serene. "The castle has been waiting a very long time," she said simply. "It's rather impatient to begin." "Begin what?" Neville asked, looking between Luna and Harry with growing confusion. Before either could answer, their carriage arrived at the castle steps. Dumbledore stood waiting, his expression unreadable behind his half-moon spectacles. Professor McGonagall had joined him, looking somewhat shaken by the magical display. "Mr. Potter," Dumbledore said calmly as Harry descended from the carriage, "it seems Hogwarts has chosen to make its own announcement regarding your status. Perhaps you would join me in my office before the feast." The light from the founder's ring had faded, but Harry could still feel the magic pulsing through it. "Yes, Professor," he replied, aware that every nearby student was straining to hear their conversation. "The rest of you," McGonagall addressed Harry's companions and the gathering crowd, "proceed to the Great Hall immediately. The sorting ceremony will commence shortly." Ron gave Harry an encouraging nod, while Hermione whispered, "We'll save you a seat," before being swept along with the crowd. Neville followed, looking back at Harry with undisguised confusion and concern. Luna, however, paused before joining them. "The castle likes you, Harry Potter," she said with a smile. That's really quite special. Then she drifted away, somehow moving against the current of students without seeming to notice. As Harry followed Dumbledore into the entrance hall, he became acutely aware of the castle in a way he'd never experienced before. Every stone, every portrait, every torch seemed to reach out to his senses. The very air hummed with magic that responded to his presence. "I sense you're experiencing Hogwarts differently now," Dumbledore observed as they climbed the marble staircase. "It's like, everything's alive," Harry said, struggling to articulate the sensation. "I can feel the magic in the walls, the floors, even the air." That would be the hereditary connection awakening. Dumbledore led them down a corridor where the suits of armor seemed to straighten as Harry passed. "The castle recognizes its rightful heir." Harry noticed that they weren't taking the usual route to the headmaster's office. "Where are we going?" "A slight detour," Dumbledore replied. "I believe Hogwarts wishes to show you something before our discussion." They turned down a corridor Harry had never noticed before, though he could have sworn he knew this part of the castle well. The passage ended at a plain stone wall that began to ripple like water as they approached. "The Founder's Sanctum," Dumbledore explained, gesturing toward the wall. "A chamber known only in legend, which has remained sealed for centuries. According to Hogwarts lore, only the true heir can open it." Harry stared at the rippling stone. "What do I do?" "I believe the ring will guide you." Harry looked down at the Founder's ring on his finger, which had begun to glow again. Acting on instinct, he placed his hand against the wall. The stone felt warm beneath his palm, pulsing with the same rhythm as the magic flowing through the ring. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like a deep exhalation, the wall simply ceased to exist. Where solid stone had been seconds before, a magnificent archway now stood, revealing a large circular chamber beyond. "After you, Harry," Dumbledore said quietly. "You are the first to enter this room in over 600 years." Harry stepped through the archway into the Founder's Sanctum. The chamber was perfectly round, with a high domed ceiling painted to show the night sky, similar to the Great Hall but more intricate, with constellations that seemed to move and flow. Four great fireplaces were set at equal distances around the room, each bearing the crest of a Hogwarts house above its mantel. Between them stood tall bookcases filled with ancient tomes, comfortable-looking chairs, and tables bearing curious silver instruments. In the center of the chamber stood a large round table made of pale wood, with 4 ornate chairs placed around it. Upon the table's surface was an intricate model of Hogwarts Castle, perfect in every detail and glowing with the same golden light that had illuminated the real castle moments before. "Remarkable," Dumbledore breathed, following Harry into the chamber. "Truly remarkable." Harry approached the model castle, drawn by its soft golden glow. As he neared, tiny figures appeared within the miniature, moving representations of every person currently in Hogwarts. He could see the students filing into the Great Hall, professors at the staff table, even Filch patrolling a corridor with Mrs. Norris at his heels. "Is this showing the castle in real time?" Harry asked in wonder. "I believe so," Dumbledore replied, studying the model with evident fascination. "A magical surveillance system of extraordinary sophistication. Rowena Ravenclaw's work, if I'm not mistaken." Harry noticed that one of the chairs at the round table, the one bearing Gryffindor's crest, was glowing slightly, as if inviting him to sit. He hesitated, then carefully lowered himself into it. The moment he made contact with the chair, the model castle flared brighter, and Harry felt a surge of awareness flow through him. Suddenly, he could sense every person in the real castle, every classroom, every corridor, every hidden passage, even areas he'd never known existed. "Professor," he gasped, overwhelmed by the influx of information, "I can feel the whole castle, every room, every person." "The Founder's map," Dumbledore said quietly. "Far more comprehensive than the clever creation your father and his friends devised. This is how the Founders monitored their school, ensuring the safety of all within its walls." Harry's eyes were drawn to the Great Hall and the model, where hundreds of tiny student figures were now seated at their house tables. He could somehow sense their emotions, excitement, confusion, curiosity, all swirling together in a complex tapestry. "They're waiting for us," he said, rising from the chair. The connection remained even as he stood, though the intensity diminished slightly. "We should go to the feast." Dumbledore nodded. "Indeed. Though I suspect our conversation must wait until afterward. Events have overtaken our careful plans, Harry, and now we must adapt." As they turned to leave, Harry noticed something he'd overlooked before. In a shadowed alcove between the Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff fireplaces stood a life-size statue of a familiar figure, a powerfully built wizard with a lion's head staff and a sword at his belt. "Godric Gryffindor," Harry said, approaching the statue. As he spoke the name, the statue's eyes opened, revealing gems that glowed with golden light. "Heir of my blood," the statue spoke in a deep, resonant voice that made Harry jump back in surprise. "You have returned to Hogwarts at last. The castle awakens to your presence, as was foretold." Dumbledore had gone very still, watching the interaction with undisguised awe. I didn't know I was your heir until recently," Harry said, feeling oddly compelled to explain himself to the statue. "Knowledge comes when it is needed, not when it is convenient," the statue replied. "You bear my blood, as well as that of Rowena and Helga. The convergence was prophesied at the founding, a triple heir who would return when Hogwarts faced its greatest peril." Harry's heart sank. "Another prophecy? Not of doom, young heir, but of renewal." The statue's gem eyes studied him intently. "Hogwarts was built to be more than it has become. Under Regency, much has been forgotten. Much has been changed. It is your task to remember. To restore. To protect." "How am I supposed to do that?" Harry asked. "I've only just found out about any of this." "The castle will guide you. The relics will teach you." The statue began to return to its dormant state, the glow fading from its eyes. "When you are ready, perform the awakening. Hogwarts awaits its true purpose." With those final words, the statue became still once more, just an ordinary carving of stone. "Well," Dumbledore said after a moment of silence, "it seems the Founders left more guidance than I had anticipated." He regarded Harry thoughtfully. "We should proceed to the Great Hall, Harry. Your absence has undoubtedly been noticed." As they left the sanctum, the archway sealed itself behind them, becoming solid stone once more. Harry knew, however, that he would be able to find it again easily. The castle would show him the way. "Professor," Harry said as they walked, "what did the statue mean about Hogwarts' true purpose? Isn't it just a school?" "That, Harry, is a question that has intrigued scholars for centuries." Dumbledore's eyes twinkled despite the seriousness of his expression. "The Founders created Hogwarts during a dangerous time for those with magic. Some historians believe they intended it to be more than an educational institution, perhaps a fortress, a repository of magical knowledge, or even a sanctuary for all magical beings. They had reached the entrance to the Great Hall, where the sound of hundreds of voices could be heard within. Dumbledore paused, hand on the door. "I believe we should enter separately," he suggested. "I will go first and begin the announcements. You may join your friends at Gryffindor table, and I will address the matter of your inheritance after the sorting ceremony." Harry nodded, glad for a few more moments to collect himself. "And Harry," Dumbledore added quietly, "whatever Hogwarts may have planned for your role here, remember that you are still, first and foremost, a student. Your education remains your priority." With that, the headmaster pushed open the doors and strode into the Great Hall, leaving Harry alone with his thoughts. The moment Dumbledore entered the Great Hall, the cacophony of excited voices diminished to a murmur of anticipation. Harry waited until the headmaster had taken his place at the staff table before slipping in through the partially open doors. He had hoped to reach the Gryffindor table without drawing attention, but it was a futile wish. The instant he appeared, hundreds of heads turned in his direction. Whispers erupted throughout the hall as he made his way to where Ron and Hermione had saved him a seat. "What happened?" Hermione asked urgently as he sat down between them. Did Dumbledore explain anything about that magical display? Not exactly, Harry replied, keeping his voice low. He took me to a hidden room I've never seen before, the Founder's Sanctum. It has a magical model of the entire castle and a statue of Gryffindor that talked to me. Ron's eyebrows shot up. A statue talked to you? What did it say? Something about me being a triple heir and Hogwarts having a true purpose that's been forgotten. Harry glanced up at the staff table, where he noticed several professors watching him with undisguised curiosity. I'll tell you everything later. His attention was drawn to the newcomer at the staff table, a squat woman with a toad-like face dressed entirely in pink. She was studying Harry with an expression of calculated interest that made him instantly wary. That must be Umbridge, Hermione whispered, following his gaze. The Ministry spy Dumbledore warned you about. Looks like a toad in a pink cardigan, Ron muttered. Further conversation was halted as Professor McGonagall led the line of nervous first-years into the hall for the sorting ceremony. Harry noticed that even this familiar ritual felt different to him now. He could sense the ancient magic in the sorting hat, recognize the subtle enchantments that helped guide each student to their appropriate house. As Zeller, Rose, was sorted into Hufflepuff and the ceremony concluded, Dumbledore rose to his feet. The hall fell silent in anticipation. To our newcomers, Dumbledore said, arms spread wide in welcome, welcome. To our old hands, welcome back. Before we begin our banquet, I have several announcements, including one of particular significance. Harry felt the weight of hundreds of eyes shifting toward him again. As many of you witnessed upon your arrival this evening, Hogwarts Castle itself made a rather dramatic announcement. Dumbledore's tone was conversational, as if discussing nothing more remarkable than a change in the breakfast menu. For those who missed it, the castle magically proclaimed the presence of its heir, a student who, through blood inheritance, holds legal ownership of Hogwarts School. The murmurs grew louder, many students now openly staring at Harry. While this may seem extraordinary, it is actually a return to Hogwarts' original governance structure. The school was never intended to operate indefinitely under Regency, but to eventually welcome the return of Founder blood. That time has come. Dumbledore turned his gaze directly to Harry. Mr. Potter, would you join me at the front, please? Harry hesitated only briefly before rising from his seat. The walk to the staff table felt interminable, with every eye in the Great Hall tracking his progress. When he reached Dumbledore, the headmaster placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and turned him to face the students. Harry Potter, through a convergence of bloodlines, is the hereditary descendant of 3 Hogwarts founders, Godric Gryffindor, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Helga Hufflepuff. The hall erupted in astonished exclamations. At the Slytherin table, Harry could see Draco Malfoy's face contorted in disbelief and outrage. As such, Dumbledore continued when the noise had subsided, Mr. Potter holds legal ownership of 60% of Hogwarts Castle and its grounds. The remaining 40% belongs to the heir of Slytherin and to the Board of Governors in trust. Harry noticed Umbridge shift forward in her seat, her expression hardening. This ancient inheritance carries both privileges and responsibilities, Dumbledore explained. While day-to-day operations of Hogwarts will continue under the current administrative structure, Mr. Potter will be learning about his role as heir and the unique magic that comes with it. Dumbledore turned to Harry with a slight bow that sent another shock wave of whispers through the hall. Hogwarts recognizes its heir. May your stewardship honor the Founder's vision. The gesture was clearly ceremonial, but its significance wasn't lost on anyone. The headmaster of Hogwarts had just acknowledged Harry's superior legal claim to the castle. Before Harry could respond, a high, girlish hem interrupted the moment. Dolores Umbridge had risen from her seat and was clearly intending to speak. Dumbledore looked briefly surprised, then stepped back with a courteous nod. Thank you, headmaster, for those interesting words of welcome, Umbridge said in a voice that matched her appearance, syrupy sweet with an underlying hardness. And how fascinating to learn about Mr. Potter's supposed inheritance claim. The emphasis she placed on supposed wasn't subtle. Harry felt a flicker of anger, which was immediately answered by a pulse of magic from the castle itself. The candles floating above the tables flickered briefly, and a soft tremor ran through the stone floor, just enough to be noticeable. Umbridge faltered momentarily, glancing around with sudden uncertainty before continuing. While historical curiosities are certainly charming, I must remind everyone that Hogwarts School operates under Ministry of Magic Educational Decree No. 72, which clearly establishes the Board of Governors as the legal authority over school operations, with the ministry maintaining ultimate oversight. Her smile widened as she looked directly at Harry. Ancient bloodlines and magical displays, while impressive, do not supersede established wizarding law. I'm sure Mr. Potter understands that his status as a student remains his primary identity here at Hogwarts. Harry said nothing, but he could feel the Founder's ring heating on his finger again, responding to his emotions. The castle's magic surged around him, invisible but palpable. Dumbledore smoothly stepped forward. Indeed, Professor Umbridge, Mr. Potter is first and foremost a student. However, I should clarify that the Founder's original charter predates all ministry educational decrees and was, in fact, specifically protected in the Wizarding Sovereignty Act of 1692 when the ministry was first established. Umbridge's smile became fixed. Legal nuances aside, the ministry's interest is in ensuring proper education for all students, free from distractions. She turned her attention back to the student body. The Ministry of Magic has always considered the education of young witches and wizards to be of vital importance. As she launched into what was clearly a prepared speech about ministry oversight of education, Harry felt a strange sensation, as if the castle itself were communicating with him. Without conscious thought, he raised his hand slightly, the Founder's ring now glowing visibly. Umbridge's voice suddenly faltered mid-sentence. She looked confused, cleared her throat, and attempted to continue, but no sound emerged despite her mouth moving. After several seconds of silent struggle, her voice returned. What? She sputtered, her composure shattered. Who did that? She demanded, looking accusingly around the hall. Harry lowered his hand, as surprised as anyone by what had just happened. He hadn't consciously silenced Umbridge, the castle had responded to his irritation of its own accord. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled with what might have been amusement, though his expression remained neutral. It seems Hogwarts itself may have opinions about lengthy speeches delaying dinner, Professor Umbridge. The castle's magic can be quite autonomous at times. He turned back to the students. Now, I believe we have delayed our excellent feast long enough. Mr. Potter, you may return to your seat. Tuck in. The tables suddenly filled with food, and the hall erupted in conversation again as Harry made his way back to the Gryffindor table. The looks he received ranged from awestruck to suspicious, but he kept his eyes fixed on Ron and Hermione. That was brilliant! Ron exclaimed as Harry sat down. Did you see Umbridge's face when she couldn't speak? Looked like she'd swallowed a silencing potion. I didn't do it on purpose, Harry said quietly. The castle just reacted to how I was feeling. Hermione looked troubled. Harry, if Hogwarts is responding to your emotions, you'll need to be very careful. That kind of power, I know, Hermione. Harry glanced up at the staff table, where Umbridge was now engaged in intense conversation with a nervous-looking Professor Flitwick, her expression livid. Believe me, I know. The remainder of the feast passed in a blur of whispered questions, curious stares, and Harry's growing awareness of the castle around him. He could feel Hogwarts responding to the collective emotions in the Great Hall, the stones seeming to warm with the excitement of returning students, the enchanted ceiling stars twinkling more brightly over particularly happy conversations. When dinner finally ended and Dumbledore dismissed the students to their dormitories, Harry found himself being approached by students from all houses, each with questions about his inheritance. Is it true you can control the castle, Potter? Can you change the password to the Slytherin common room? Will you still play Quidditch if you own the school? Are you technically Professor Dumbledore's boss now? Before he could answer any of them, Professor McGonagall appeared at his side. Mr. Potter, the headmaster would like to see you in his office immediately, she said crisply. Weasley, Granger, you are to escort the first years to Gryffindor Tower. Mr. Potter will join you later. As Ron and Hermione reluctantly left with the new Gryffindors, McGonagall led Harry through the dispersing crowd toward the headmaster's office. Her expression was hard to read, but Harry thought he detected concern beneath her usual stern demeanor. Professor, he ventured as they walked, are you upset about what happened with the castle's announcement? McGonagall glanced at him sharply, then softened slightly. Not upset, Potter. Concerned. Change is always difficult in institutions as old as Hogwarts, and this is perhaps the most significant change in centuries. I didn't ask for this, Harry said quietly. Few of us ask for the responsibilities we inherit, she replied with unexpected gentleness. But how we bear them defines us nonetheless. They had reached the stone gargoyle guarding the headmaster's office. Before McGonagall could give the password, the gargoyle simply bowed to Harry and jumped aside. I see Hogwarts has decided to acknowledge your authority, McGonagall observed dryly. The rotating staircase carried them upward to Dumbledore's office, where they found not only the headmaster waiting but also several other figures, Professor Snape, looking even more sour than usual, Dolores Umbridge, whose face was set in lines of bureaucratic determination, and a tall, austere wizard Harry recognized as Lucius Malfoy. Ah, Harry, thank you for joining us, Dumbledore said pleasantly, as if this were a casual social gathering rather than what was clearly shaping up to be a confrontation. I believe you know everyone here, except perhaps Mr. Malfoy, who represents the Board of Governors. We've met, Harry said coldly, remembering their last encounter at the Quidditch World Cup. Indeed, Lucius drawled, his grey eyes calculating as they took in Harry's appearance. How unexpected to discover the Potter boy laying claim to founder inheritance. Especially given the lack of verification beyond a theatrical display of questionable magic. The inheritance has been verified by Gringotts, Dumbledore stated calmly. The goblin inheritance test is considered magically binding and legally irrefutable. Goblin magic, Umbridge said with a dismissive little laugh. Hardly reliable when it comes to wizarding institutions as important as Hogwarts. The ministry will require considerably more evidence before acknowledging any change in the school's legal status. Harry felt the founder's ring warm on his finger again, responding to his rising irritation. He took a deep breath, remembering Hermione's warning about the castle reacting to his emotions. The evidence is abundant for those willing to see it, Dumbledore replied. The castle's recognition alone could be manipulated, Lucius interrupted smoothly. No offense intended, headmaster, but your affection for Potter is well known. A clever enchantment could create quite the convincing spectacle. Harry couldn't contain himself any longer. You think Professor Dumbledore faked the entire castle lighting up and announcing me as the heir? Why would he do that? Political maneuvering takes many forms, Mr. Potter, Lucius replied with a thin smile. Perhaps the headmaster seeks to consolidate his influence through you, creating a story grand enough to captivate the credulous. That's ridiculous, Harry said flatly. Is it? Umbridge leaned forward, her voice sickeningly sweet. A story that conveniently places you, already the famous boy who lived, in an even more special position, with authority that supersedes the ministry itself. How very convenient. I didn't ask for any of this, Harry said through gritted teeth. And yet, here you are, Lucius observed. Claiming ownership of Britain's premier magical institution based on a goblin test and a light show. The founder's ring was now hot against Harry's skin, and he could feel the castle's magic stirring around them, responding to his anger. The silver instruments on Dumbledore's desk began to vibrate slightly. Perhaps, Snape spoke for the first time, his dark eyes fixed on Harry with their usual dislike. Potter could provide a demonstration of this supposed connection to the castle. If he truly is the heir to 3 founders, surely he can command Hogwarts in some tangible, verifiable way. Harry glanced at Dumbledore, who gave him a slight nod of encouragement. Fine, Harry said, turning to face the office at large. He had no idea what he was supposed to do, but the ring on his finger pulsed with magic, and he felt a sudden certainty about how to proceed. Raising his hand with the ring, Harry focused on his connection to the castle, that golden thread he'd felt since approaching Hogwarts. As heir to Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, and Ravenclaw, I ask Hogwarts to reveal the Founder's seal. The words came to him instinctively, as if whispered by the castle itself. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the floor in the center of Dumbledore's office began to glow. The stone seemed to melt away, revealing an elaborate circular seal embedded in the floor, a design Harry had never seen before, showing the 4 house animals intertwined around a large H. The seal rose from the floor until it hovered at waist height, rotating slowly and emanating a golden light that illuminated everyone in the room. 3 of the 4 animals, the lion, eagle, and badger, glowed with particular brightness, while the snake remained dormant. "The Founder's seal," McGonagall whispered, her composure momentarily shattered by genuine awe. "It's been hidden for centuries." Even Snape looked impressed despite himself, while Umbridge had gone very pale. Lucius Malfoy, however, maintained his cold composure. "An interesting parlor trick, Mr. Potter." However, before he could finish, the seal suddenly projected a beam of light directly at Harry's chest, where the pouch containing the Founder artifacts lay hidden beneath his robes. The light spread to encompass his entire body, and Harry felt a surge of magic flowing through him, ancient, powerful, and unmistakably real. When the light faded, the seal remained floating in the center of the room, but now words had appeared around its circumference in glowing script: "The heir is confirmed by blood and magic. Let all who would challenge this claim beware the Founder's law." "I believe," Dumbledore said into the stunned silence that followed, "that settles the question of verification." Umbridge recovered first, her bureaucratic instincts overwhelming her momentary shock. "Magical manifestations, however impressive, do not supersede ministry authority in educational matters," she insisted, though her voice lacked its previous confidence. "On the contrary, Professor Umbridge," Dumbledore replied, reaching for an ancient-looking book on his desk. "According to the Wizarding Sovereignty Act, Section 12, Paragraph 4, institutions predating ministry establishment retain their original charters and governance structures where these are activated by hereditary or conferred magical right." He opened the book to a marked page and continued, "Furthermore, the specific case of Hogwarts is addressed in Addendum 7, should a proven blood heir to multiple Founders present themselves, their claim to the castle and its operations shall be recognized as primary, with ministry oversight limited to standardized testing and basic safety regulations." Lucius Malfoy's eyes had narrowed dangerously. "This development will need to be reviewed by the full Board of Governors and the Minister himself." "By all means," Dumbledore agreed pleasantly. "Though I should note that the board's 15% ownership stake is a trust granted by Helga Hufflepuff's daughter, contingent on the absence of a direct heir. With Mr. Potter's confirmation as Hufflepuff's heir, that contingency has ended." The implication was clear: the Board of Governors might find their authority significantly reduced upon review. "This is preposterous," Umbridge sputtered. "The boy is 15. He cannot possibly assume control of an educational institution." "Mr. Potter will not be assuming administrative control," Dumbledore clarified calmly. "I will continue to serve as headmaster, with Mr. Potter focusing on his studies while gradually learning about his inheritance responsibilities. However, on matters where Founder authority is specifically invoked, Mr. Potter's position must be respected according to magical law." Harry, who had been watching this exchange with growing unease, finally spoke up. "I'm not interested in running the school, Professor Umbridge. I just want to study like any other student." "How convenient," Lucius said silkily. "All the prestige of ownership with none of the responsibility." "Quite the arrangement, Potter." "That's not what I meant," Harry began, but Umbridge cut him off. "The minister will hear about this immediately," she declared, rising from her chair. "Until official ministry review is complete, I suggest that no changes be made to Hogwarts operations or hierarchy." "Of course," Dumbledore inclined his head. "Though as I've explained, the ministry's authority in this matter is rather narrowly defined by magical law." "We shall see about that," Umbridge replied with brittle sweetness. "Laws can be clarified when necessary." With that ominous statement hanging in the air, she departed, the click of her heels echoing down the spiral staircase. Lucius Malfoy rose more languidly. "This isn't over, Potter," he said quietly. "Claiming ownership of Hogwarts affects many powerful interests. You would be wise to tread carefully." After he too had departed, Snape gave Harry a long, inscrutable look before turning to Dumbledore. "If that's all, Headmaster, I have preparations to make for tomorrow's classes." "Of course, Severus. Thank you for your presence." When only McGonagall, Dumbledore, and Harry remained, the headmaster sighed deeply and leaned back in his chair. "Well, that was rather more confrontational than I had hoped for our first evening." "What did you expect?" McGonagall asked tartly. "You've just informed the Ministry and the Board of Governors that their authority over Hogwarts has been superseded by a 15-year-old boy they're actively trying to discredit." "I am aware of the political complications, Minerva," Dumbledore replied mildly. "However, the castle itself has made its choice quite clear. We can no more deny Harry's status as heir than we could deny the magic of Hogwarts itself." Harry, who had been silent during this exchange, finally asked the question foremost in his mind: what happens now? Dumbledore regarded him thoughtfully over his half-moon spectacles. "Now, Harry, we prepare for the Ministry's response, which will undoubtedly be swift and possibly heavy-handed. Professor Umbridge will report to Minister Fudge, who will likely attempt to assert control through new educational decrees." "Can he do that?" "If the law says my claim takes precedence." "Minister Fudge has become quite adept at creating new laws when existing ones prove inconvenient," Dumbledore said with a touch of dryness. "However, Founder magic is older and more powerful than ministerial decrees. Hogwarts itself has recognized you, and that cannot be undone by political maneuvering." McGonagall's expression softened slightly as she looked at Harry. "Potter, you should understand that this inheritance places you in a complicated position. Many will resent your authority, especially given your age. Others will attempt to use you for their own purposes." "Story of my life," Harry muttered. "Indeed," Dumbledore agreed with a small smile. "Which is why we must proceed carefully. I suggest you focus on your studies and quietly explore your connection to the castle. Learn what it means to be the heir before attempting to exercise your authority too publicly." "And what about Professor Umbridge? She doesn't seem likely to let me just focus on my studies." "No, I expect she will not," Dumbledore sighed. "Professor Umbridge represents the Ministry's determination to control the narrative around Voldemort's return. Your new status complicates her mission considerably. She'll make his life miserable," McGonagall stated bluntly. "Perhaps," Dumbledore agreed. "Or perhaps she will find that challenging the heir of Hogwarts within Hogwarts itself is more difficult than she anticipates." The floating seal, which had remained suspended in the center of the office throughout their conversation, suddenly began to descend back into the floor. As it did, Harry felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him, the events of the day finally catching up with him. Dumbledore noticed immediately. "You should rest, Harry. It has been an eventful day, and the castle's magic has been drawing on your energy. Professor McGonagall will escort you to Gryffindor Tower." As Harry rose to leave, Dumbledore added, "Oh, and Harry. Perhaps it would be wise to begin reading those founder journals you acquired. I suspect they may contain guidance for navigating the challenges ahead." Harry nodded tiredly and followed McGonagall toward the door. Just as they reached it, Dumbledore called after them, "One more thing, Harry. Welcome home." Despite everything, Harry felt a smile tug at his lips. Whatever complications his inheritance had created, one thing remained true: Hogwarts was his home. And now, in a way he'd never imagined, it truly belonged to him. Harry's arrival in Gryffindor Tower created an immediate sensation. The common room fell silent as he entered, then erupted into a cacophony of questions and exclamations. It seemed everyone had been waiting for his return, eager for details about the evening's extraordinary events. "Is it true you own the castle, Harry? Can you change the house point system? Will you fire Snape? Before he could answer any of these, Fred and George Weasley pushed through the crowd and ceremoniously bowed before him. "All hail Lord Potter," Fred proclaimed dramatically, supreme ruler of toilets and classrooms. "Owner of staircases and benevolent master of dormitories," George added with equal theatricality. Their performance broke the tension, and laughter rippled through the common room. Harry felt a rush of gratitude toward the twins for turning what could have been an awkward hero worship session into something more lighthearted. "All right, that's enough," he said, unable to suppress a smile. "I'm still just Harry." "Just Harry who happens to own the place we live," Fred pointed out. "Are you going to charge us rent?" asked a nervous-looking second year. "Of course not," Harry assured him. "Nothing's changing. I'm still a student like the rest of you. Except you can probably turn the Slytherin common room into a swamp if you wanted," Ron observed, appearing at Harry's side with Hermione. "Ronald!" Hermione admonished, though her lips twitched slightly. The questions continued for nearly an hour before Hermione finally put her foot down, insisting that Harry needed rest after such an eventful day. As the crowd reluctantly dispersed, Harry found himself cornered by Ron, Hermione, Neville, Ginny, and the twins in a quiet corner of the common room. "What actually happened in Dumbledore's office?" Hermione asked in a low voice. "We saw Umbridge and Lucius Malfoy leaving, and neither looked happy." Harry briefly recounted the confrontation, including the appearance of the Founder's seal and the legal arguments Dumbledore had presented. "Blimey," Ron breathed when he'd finished. "So it's actually official? You legally own Hogwarts?" 60% of it, yeah," Harry confirmed. "Though I'm not planning to make any big changes or anything." "You might not have a choice," Hermione said worriedly. "If Umbridge is reporting directly to Fudge, they'll try to undermine your position however they can." "Let them try," Fred said with unusual seriousness. The castle itself recognized Harry. "That's ancient magic, the kind the Ministry can't easily override. Besides," George added, "having the heir of Hogwarts on our side could be dead useful with Umbridge trying to enforce Ministry control over the school." Neville, who had been quiet until now, leaned forward slightly. "What does it actually feel like, Harry? Being connected to the castle, I mean." It was a thoughtful question, and Harry took a moment to consider his answer. "It's like being aware of a huge living thing all around you," he said slowly. "I can sense the magic in the walls, the floors, even the air. Earlier, I could feel everyone in the Great Hall, their emotions, their energy. And the castle responds to me somehow, not just to what I say, but to what I feel." "That's incredible," Ginny said softly. "It's also potentially dangerous," Hermione pointed out. "If Hogwarts reacts to your emotions, you'll need to be very careful about controlling them." "I know," Harry sighed. "When Umbridge was speaking in Dumbledore's office, I got annoyed, and I could feel the castle's magic getting restless. I think it wanted to throw her out or something." "Should have let it," Ron muttered. "That wouldn't exactly help prove I'm responsible enough to handle this inheritance," Harry pointed out. "Speaking of responsibility," Hermione said, reaching into her bag, "I've been doing some preliminary research. There's not much in the standard texts about Hogwarts having an heir or being sentient, but there are a few references to the Awakened Castle in Hogwarts, a history that I never fully understood until now." She pulled out her well-worn copy of the book and flipped to a marked page. "Listen to this. In the era of Fortinbras the Fair, when the castle was last fully awakened, corridors would appear and vanish according to student needs, the Great Hall would adapt its size and arrangement without direction, and the very stones were said to sing on festival days." "The castle can do all that?" Neville asked, wide-eyed. "Apparently when it's fully awakened, yes." Hermione looked up at Harry. "I think that's what the awakening ceremony must be for, to restore Hogwarts to its original magical capabilities." Harry thought of the Founder artifacts in the pouch against his chest and the statue's words, "When you are ready, perform the awakening. Hogwarts awaits its true purpose." "I don't think I'm ready for that yet," he admitted. I barely understand what being the heir means, let alone how to awaken the entire castle. Wise decision, came a new voice. They looked up to find Professor McGonagall standing nearby, her expression stern but not unkind. The awakening is not a ritual to be undertaken lightly, Mr. Potter. Professor. Hermione said, startled. We were just discussing matters that directly concern Mr. Potter's inheritance, McGonagall finished for her. Perfectly understandable. However, it is now well past curfew, and heir or not, Mr. Potter needs his rest before classes tomorrow. The group began to disperse, but McGonagall held Harry back momentarily. A word of advice, Potter. The castle responds to intent as much as to emotion. If you find its magic reacting too strongly to your feelings, focus your intentions clearly. Hogwarts will respond accordingly. Thank you, Professor, Harry said, surprised by the practical guidance. McGonagall nodded curtly. Good night, Potter. And, good luck. I suspect you'll need it in the coming days. Harry slept fitfully that night, his dreams filled with wandering corridors that shifted and changed around him, doors that opened into impossible spaces, and a persistent voice that seemed to whisper just beyond his comprehension. When he finally woke, the Founder's ring was glowing softly on his finger, as if it had been active throughout his sleep. The other boys in the dormitory were watching him with undisguised curiosity as they dressed for breakfast. Is it true the Bloody Baron had to bow to you last night? Seamus asked, his tone somewhere between skeptical and impressed. What? No, Harry replied, confused. I didn't even see the Bloody Baron. People are saying all the ghosts have to acknowledge you as the castle's owner now, Dean explained. Apparently, nearly headless Nick made some big formal announcement about it in the corridors last night. Great, Harry muttered, pulling on his robes. Just what I need, more rumors. Ron clapped him on the shoulder sympathetically. Look on the bright side. At least they're talking about you being the heir of Hogwarts instead of being a delusional attention seeker like the prophet's been saying. I suppose, Harry conceded, though he wasn't entirely convinced that trading one type of unwanted attention for another was much of an improvement. As they made their way down to breakfast, Harry became acutely aware of changes in how the castle responded to him. Doorknobs turned before he could grasp them, suits of armor stood to attention as he passed, and staircases seemed to arrange themselves for his convenience rather than shifting away. It was subtle enough that others might not notice, but to Harry, the difference was unmistakable. Hogwarts was acknowledging its heir. The great hall fell into a hush when he entered, hundreds of eyes tracking his progress to the Gryffindor table. Harry kept his gaze fixed ahead, trying to ignore the whispers that followed in his wake. Just like second year with the chamber, Ron muttered beside him. Everyone's staring like you're going to do something dramatic over breakfast. Thanks for the reminder, Harry replied dryly. At the staff table, Dumbledore was engaged in conversation with Professor Flitwick, while Umbridge was conspicuously absent. Professor McGonagall moved among the Gryffindors, distributing timetables with her usual efficiency. When she reached Harry, she handed him his schedule with a significant look. Defense against the dark arts this afternoon, Potter. I suggest particular caution in that class. Harry glanced down at his timetable and suppressed a groan. Double potions with Snape followed by defense with Umbridge, not an auspicious start to the year. Potter, McGonagall added in a lower voice, the headmaster asked me to inform you that the castle has prepared a space for your special studies. The entrance will reveal itself to you when you require it. Before Harry could ask for clarification, she had moved on to the next student. Hermione, who had overheard, leaned forward eagerly. Special studies? Do you think that means learning about the Founder magic? Must be, Harry replied, still puzzled by McGonagall's cryptic message. Though I've no idea where this space is supposed to be or how I'm meant to find it. The castle will show you, Ron said confidently, helping himself to more sausages. That's what McGonagall meant, it'll appear when you need it, like the Room of Requirement. The mention of the Room of Requirement triggered something in Harry's memory, the model of Hogwarts he'd seen in the Founder's Sanctum, with its detailed representation of every room in the castle. He'd noticed areas on that model that he'd never seen in the real Hogwarts, including what had looked like a vast chamber directly beneath the Great Hall. Before he could pursue this thought further, the morning post arrived in a flutter of owls. Harry wasn't expecting any mail, so he was surprised when a regal-looking tawny owl landed before him, bearing a letter with the official ministry seal. "That can't be good," Ron observed as Harry hesitantly took the envelope. The parchment inside bore the ministry letterhead and was written in precise, formal script, "Mr. Harry James Potter, Gryffindor Tower, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Dear Mr. Potter, it has come to the ministry's attention that you have made certain claims regarding inheritance rights to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. In accordance with Educational Decree No. 74, all claims affecting the legal status of educational institutions must be formally reviewed by the Department of Magical Education before any changes to administrative structure can be recognized. You are hereby required to present all documentation supporting your inheritance claim to Senior Undersecretary Dolores Umbridge, who has been appointed special investigator in this matter. Failure to comply within 7 days will result in formal rejection of your claim. Additionally, until this review is complete, you are instructed to refrain from exercising any supposed authority over Hogwarts Castle or its operations. Yours sincerely, Cornelius Fudge, Minister for Magic. They're not wasting any time," Hermione said grimly, reading over Harry's shoulder. "Though I'm fairly certain Educational Decree No. 74 didn't exist until last night." "They're making up rules as they go," Harry agreed, folding the letter and putting it in his pocket. "Dumbledore warned this would happen." "Are you going to give Umbridge your inheritance documents?" Ron asked. Harry considered the question. "I'll talk to Dumbledore first, but I'm not opposed to showing the Gringotts verification. It's magically binding, they can't dispute it even if they want to." "They'll try," Hermione predicted darkly. "The Ministry won't want to acknowledge any authority at Hogwarts that they don't control, especially with Fudge so determined to deny Voldemort's return." As they left the Great Hall for their first class, Harry noticed something odd. A suit of armor that he could have sworn had been standing against the wall was now following them at a discreet distance. "Don't look now," he murmured to Ron and Hermione, "but I think we've got a metal shadow." Ron glanced back casually, then did a double take. "Blimey, that armor wasn't there a minute ago." "I think the castle might be protecting me," Harry said, feeling simultaneously touched and embarrassed by the notion. "Or keeping an eye on you," Hermione suggested thoughtfully. "If Hogwarts is somewhat sentient, it might want to monitor its heir, especially when you're still learning about your connection." The armor maintained its distance throughout the morning, standing guard outside classrooms while Harry attended lessons and repositioning itself to follow when they moved to new locations. Other students began to notice, adding to the already considerable whispers that followed Harry everywhere. By the time they descended to the dungeons for potions, the story had evolved into a claim that Harry commanded an army of enchanted armor that would attack anyone who questioned his ownership of Hogwarts. "Mr. Potter," Snape said silkily as they entered the classroom, "while I'm sure having a personal bodyguard strokes your already considerable ego, kindly instruct your metal companion to remain outside my classroom. We wouldn't want any accidents with the volatile ingredients we'll be using today." Snickers came from the Slytherin side of the room, led by Draco Malfoy, whose expression was even more contemptuous than usual. "I didn't ask it to follow me, Professor," Harry replied truthfully. "Indeed?" Snape raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Perhaps the castle's heir should have better control over his domain. Or is your much-vaunted ownership more ceremonial than functional?" Harry felt his temper rising and made a conscious effort to control it, remembering Hermione's warning about the castle responding to his emotions. The last thing he needed was for Hogwarts to intervene on his behalf in Snape's classroom. "I'm still learning about the connection, Professor," he managed to say evenly. "How convenient," Snape remarked, turning away. Page 37, everyone. The Draft of Peace. Instructions on the board. Begin. As Harry gathered ingredients from the student cupboard, he couldn't help but notice the calculating looks Malfoy was giving him. Finally, as they both reached for powdered moonstone, Malfoy spoke in a low voice that only Harry could hear. "My father says your little inheritance claim will be dismissed by the end of the week, Potter. The minister himself is preparing a special decree to clarify Hogwarts' legal status once and for all." "Your father should know all about manipulating the ministry," Harry replied quietly. "But even Lucius Malfoy can't override founder magic." Malfoy's pale face flushed slightly. "We'll see about that. The castle may have put on an impressive light show, but when it comes to real power, the ministry and the board of governors still make the rules." "Is that why your father looked so worried in Dumbledore's office last night?" Harry countered. "Because he's so confident." Before Malfoy could respond, Snape called for attention, and they were forced to return to their cauldrons. Throughout the lesson, however, Harry could feel Malfoy's gaze fixed on him with calculated intensity, as if trying to solve a particularly vexing puzzle. By the end of the class, Harry's draft of peace was emitting the light silver vapor described in the textbook, though not quite as perfectly as Hermione's. As he bottled a sample for grading, he caught Snape watching him with an unreadable expression. "Mr. Potter," Snape said as Harry submitted his potion, a word after class. Ron and Hermione exchanged worried glances with Harry before reluctantly leaving him behind as the classroom emptied. When the last student had gone, Snape closed the door with a flick of his wand and turned to face Harry. "Your potion was adequate today," Snape began, sounding almost as if the admission pained him. "A surprising improvement over your usual mediocrity." "Thank you, sir," Harry replied cautiously, unsure where this was heading. "I wonder," Snape continued, "if your newfound connection to the castle might be affecting your magical capabilities. The founders were known to have embedded enhancement charms throughout Hogwarts to assist in learning. Perhaps as heir, you now benefit from these directly." It wasn't something Harry had considered. "I don't know, Professor. I didn't feel any different while brewing." Snape studied him with narrowed eyes. "You may not have noticed, but your magical signature has changed since yesterday. It's stronger, more defined. Curious, given that magical maturity typically occurs at 17, not 15. Harry shifted uncomfortably under Snape's scrutiny. "Professor, was there something specific you wanted to discuss?" Snape seemed to come to a decision. "A warning, Potter. The ownership of Hogwarts has been a contentious issue in magical politics for centuries. Many previous claims have been made, though none successfully verified by the castle itself. You have stepped into a conflict that predates you by many generations." "I didn't step into anything," Harry protested. "This was thrust upon me." "Regardless," Snape continued, unaffected by Harry's objection, "you now represent a significant disruption to the established order. The ministry, the board of governors, and other interested parties will not relinquish their influence easily." "Other interested parties?" Harry repeated. "You mean Voldemort?" Snape flinched slightly at the name but nodded curtly. "The Dark Lord has always coveted Hogwarts. As Slytherin's heir, he believes the castle should rightfully be his. Your claim to 3/4 of the founder bloodlines directly challenges that belief." "Great," Harry muttered. "Another reason for him to want me dead." "Indeed." Snape's expression remained severe. "Which is why your occlumency training will now be even more critical than the headmaster originally intended." "My what training?" "Occlumency," Snape repeated impatiently. "The magical defense of the mind against external penetration. The headmaster had planned to arrange lessons later in the term, but in light of recent developments, we will begin immediately. Tomorrow evening, my office, 7 o'clock. Harry wanted to object. The last thing he needed was more time with Snape, but the professor's mention of external penetration reminded him uncomfortably of the strange dreams and visions he'd been having since Voldemort's return. "Yes, sir," he agreed reluctantly. Snape nodded curtly. "You may go. And Potter," he added as Harry reached the door, "I suggest you learn to control that suit of armor." The castle responding to your unconscious desires could become problematic. Harry emerged from the dungeons to find Ron and Hermione waiting, the faithful suit of armor standing at attention nearby. What did Snape want? Ron asked immediately. To warn me about political conflicts over Hogwarts ownership and to tell me I'll be taking something called occlumency lessons with him, Harry explained as they headed toward the Great Hall for lunch. Occlumency? Hermione's eyes widened. That's incredibly advanced magic, Harry, the protection of the mind against external magical influence. It's rarely taught outside specialized magical security fields. Snape said Dumbledore had already planned for me to learn it, but they're starting sooner because of the inheritance thing. That makes sense, Hermione nodded. If you know who learns you're the heir to Hogwarts, he'll be even more determined to get to you. And with your mental connection to him. She trailed off, but Harry understood her concern. The strange visions and dreams connecting him to Voldemort could become even more dangerous now. Great, Ron said gloomily. Extra lessons with Snape. Just what you needed. As they entered the Great Hall, Harry noticed an unusual sight at the staff table. Dumbledore was absent, and Umbridge was seated in the center chair normally occupied by the headmaster. Her self-satisfied smile as she surveyed the students sent a chill down Harry's spine. That can't be good, he muttered to his friends. As if on cue, Umbridge tapped her glass with a spoon, calling for attention. When the hall quieted, she rose, her pink cardigan almost painfully bright against the subdued colors of the Great Hall. Hem, she began in her girlish voice. I have a brief announcement before we enjoy our lovely lunch. By order of the Ministry of Magic, Educational Decree No. 75 has been enacted, temporarily appointing me, Dolores Umbridge, as High Inquisitor of Hogwarts. Murmurs broke out across the hall as students exchanged confused glances. In this capacity, Umbridge continued, her smile widening, I will be evaluating all aspects of Hogwarts operations, from teaching standards to administrative decisions, to ensure compliance with Ministry educational guidelines. Her gaze fixed directly on Harry as she added, furthermore, the Ministry is conducting a thorough review of certain historical claims regarding Hogwarts ownership. Until this review is complete, any assertion of authority over school operations outside the established chain of command will be considered in violation of Educational Decree No. 76 and subject to disciplinary action. The message couldn't have been clearer if she'd addressed Harry by name. Do not attempt to exercise your claim as heir. Where's Dumbledore? Harry whispered to Hermione. I don't know, she replied worriedly. But Umbridge taking his chair, that's a power play. She's symbolically asserting Ministry control over Hogwarts. Harry felt a familiar warmth from the Founder's Ring, followed by a subtle tremor that ran through the Great Hall. The enchanted ceiling, which had been showing a calm blue sky, suddenly darkened with storm clouds that rumbled ominously. Several students looked up nervously, while Umbridge's smile faltered slightly. She quickly recovered, however, dismissing the magical response with a wave of her hand. Weather charms sometimes act up this time of year, she said with forced lightness. Now, enjoy your lunch, children. As food appeared on the tables, Harry noticed that the suit of armor which had been following him all morning had moved to stand directly behind him, like a sentinel on guard. More concerning, he realized that similar armored figures had positioned themselves at intervals around the Great Hall, all of them facing inward, toward Umbridge. Harry, Hermione hissed, the armor, the castle's responding to your reaction to Umbridge. I'm not doing it consciously, Harry whispered back, trying to control his emotions. It's just happening. Ron looked around at the imposing metal figures. Well, can you make it unhappen? Umbridge is going to notice, and she's already looking for reasons to crack down on you. Harry closed his eyes briefly, focusing on the connection he felt with the castle. Stand down, he thought clearly, directing his intention toward the magical awareness he could sense all around him. This isn't helping. To his relief, the suits of armor gradually retreated to their usual positions against the walls, though they remained facing the hall rather than standing at their customary attention. That was close, Hermione breathed. Harry, You've got to be more careful with your emotions around Umbridge. The castle clearly doesn't like her, and it's responding to your feelings about her. I'll try, Harry promised, though he wasn't entirely sure how to prevent his instinctive reactions to Umbridge's provocations. Lunch passed tensely, with Harry acutely aware of Umbridge watching him from the headmaster's chair. When they finally headed to defense against the dark arts that afternoon, the atmosphere among the fifth years was one of nervous anticipation. "This is going to be a disaster," Hermione predicted as they took seats in the middle of the classroom. "She's clearly looking to provoke you, Harry." "I know," Harry replied grimly. "I'll just have to keep my cool, no matter what." The class fell silent as Umbridge entered, dressed in the same fluffy pink cardigan she'd worn at breakfast, with the addition of a black velvet bow perched on top of her head like an oversized fly. "Good afternoon, class," she said in her sickly sweet voice. A few students mumbled responses, which clearly displeased her. "Tut, tut," she admonished. "That won't do at all. When I say, 'Good afternoon, class,' you will please respond, 'Good afternoon, Professor Umbridge.' Let's try again. Good afternoon, class." "Good afternoon, Professor Umbridge," they chanted back dutifully, though Harry merely moved his lips without speaking. "There now, that wasn't too difficult, was it?" Umbridge smiled, revealing pointed teeth. "Wands away and quills out, please." The class exchanged glances of dismay. Wands away was never a promising start to a defense class. Umbridge tapped the blackboard with her own wand, and words appeared. "Defense against the dark arts, a return to basic principles. Your instruction in this subject has been fragmented and substandard," Umbridge declared, pacing before them. "The constantly changing teachers, many of whom did not follow ministry-approved curriculum, has resulted in you being far below the standard expected at OWL level." She paused, her gaze lingering on Harry before continuing. "You will be pleased to know that these problems are now being rectified. We will be following a carefully structured, theory-centered, ministry-approved course of defensive magic this year." She tapped the board again, and a list of course aims appeared, all focused on theoretical understanding rather than practical application. Harry felt his frustration mounting as Umbridge instructed them to copy down the aims and then read the first chapter of Defensive Magical Theory, by Wilbert Slinkard, possibly the dullest text he'd ever encountered. The founder's ring warmed on his finger, and he consciously focused on controlling his emotions, not wanting the castle to respond to his growing irritation. He wasn't surprised when Hermione's hand went up after a few minutes of silent reading. What did surprise him was that she wasn't the only one. Several other students seemed to have questions as well. Umbridge initially ignored the raised hands, but when nearly half the class had stopped reading to watch Hermione's determined attempt to get attention, she finally acknowledged her with a tight smile. "Did you have a question about the chapter, dear?" "Not about the chapter, Professor," Hermione replied. "About the course aims." "And your name is?" "Hermione Granger." "Well, Miss Granger, the course aims are perfectly clear if you read them carefully," Umbridge said with exaggerated patience. "Well, I don't think they are," Hermione said bluntly. "There's nothing there about using defensive spells." A ripple of realization passed through the class as students quickly reviewed the aims on the board. "Using defensive spells?" Umbridge repeated with a little laugh. "Why, I can't imagine any situation arising in my classroom that would require you to use a defensive spell, Miss Granger. You surely aren't expecting to be attacked during class." "We're not going to use magic," Ron exclaimed incredulously. "Students raise their hands when they wish to speak in my class, Mr. Weasley," Ron said, thrusting his hand into the air. Umbridge smiled wider and turned her back on him. Harry and several others now raised their hands too. "Yes, Miss Parvati Patil. Isn't there a practical portion in our defense against the dark arts OWL? Aren't we supposed to show that we can actually perform the counterspells and defenses? With sufficient theoretical knowledge, you will be able to perform the spells under controlled examination conditions," Umbridge dismissed her concern. "Without ever practicing them beforehand?" Harry asked incredulously, forgetting to raise his hand. Are you telling us that the first time we'll cast these spells will be during the exam? Hand, Mr. Potter, sang Umbridge, though her eyes gleamed with something like satisfaction at having provoked him into speaking out. Harry thrust his hand into the air, and Umbridge promptly turned away, but now so many people had their hands up that she couldn't ignore them all. "And your name is?" she asked Dean. "Dean Thomas." "It's like Harry said, isn't it? If we're going to be attacked, it won't be in controlled conditions, I repeat," Umbridge interrupted, smiling in a way that was not pleasant. "Do you expect to be attacked during my classes?" "No, but, I do not wish to criticize the way things have been run in this school," she said, an unconvincing smile stretching her wide mouth, "but you have been exposed to some very irresponsible wizards in this class, very irresponsible indeed, not to mention dangerous half-breeds." "If you mean Professor Lupin," Dean said angrily, "he was the best defense teacher we've had, Mr. Thomas. As I was saying, you have been introduced to spells that have been complex, inappropriate for your age group, and potentially lethal. You have been frightened into believing that you are likely to meet dark attacks every other day." "No, we haven't," Hermione interrupted, "we just, your hand is not up, Miss Granger." Hermione put her hand up, but Umbridge turned away from her. "It is my understanding," Umbridge continued, "that my predecessor not only performed illegal curses in front of you, he actually performed them on you." "Well, he turned out to be a maniac, didn't he?" Dean said hotly. "Mind you, we still learned loads." "Your hand is not up, Mr. Thomas," Umbridge trilled. "Now, it is the view of the Ministry that a theoretical knowledge will be sufficient to get you through your examinations, which, after all, is what school is all about." Harry's hand was still in the air, and the Founder's ring was growing uncomfortably warm against his skin. He focused on his breathing, trying to keep his emotions in check. The castle's magic seemed to press against his consciousness, eager to respond to his mounting frustration. "And your name is?" Umbridge finally said to him, as if she didn't know perfectly well who he was. "Harry Potter." "Well, Mr. Potter." Harry took a deep breath. "In the real world, we need to be able to protect ourselves from actual dark magic. Voldemort is back, and theoretical knowledge won't save anyone when they're facing him." The room went very quiet. Some students gasped at Harry's use of Voldemort's name, while others looked between him and Umbridge with expressions of trepidation. Umbridge's face remained blank, but her eyes glittered with triumph, as if she'd been waiting for exactly this opening. 10 points from Gryffindor, Mr. Potter," she said softly. "Now, let me make a few things quite plain." She leaned forward over her desk, her stubby fingers splayed on its surface. "You have been told that a certain dark wizard has returned from the dead." "He wasn't dead," Harry interrupted, "but yeah, he's returned." "Mr. Potter, you have already lost your house. 10 points do not make matters worse for yourself," Umbridge said in a single breath without looking at him. "As I was saying, you have been informed that a certain dark wizard is at large once again." "This is a lie." "It is not a lie," Harry said, his voice rising despite his best efforts to remain calm. "I saw him, I fought him." The Founder's ring was now painfully hot on his finger, and he could feel the castle's magic surging around him, responsive to his distress. The windows of the classroom rattled slightly, and the flames in the wall sconces flared higher. "Detention, Mr. Potter," Umbridge declared triumphantly. "Tomorrow evening. 5 o'clock. My office." And a further 20 points from Gryffindor for disrupting class with these attention-seeking falsehoods. Harry opened his mouth to respond, but Hermione kicked him sharply under the desk. The windows had stopped rattling, but the classroom door had begun to creak open and closed, as if moved by an unseen hand. "I understand, Mr. Potter, that you may feel your unusual position gives you special privileges," Umbridge continued, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "But I can assure you, hereditary claims notwithstanding, the Ministry remains the ultimate authority on educational matters at Hogwarts." The doors suddenly slammed fully open with a resounding crash, causing several students to jump in alarm. Standing in the doorway was the suit of armor that had been following Harry earlier, now brandishing its sword in a decidedly threatening manner. What is the meaning of this? Umbridge demanded, her composure finally cracking. Harry, realizing that the castle was responding to his anger, quickly focused his thoughts as McGonagall had advised him. Intent, not emotion, he reminded himself. With deliberate calm, he pictured the armor returning to its normal position in the corridor. To his relief, the armor lowered its sword and stepped back, though it remained in the doorway, sentinel-like. An interesting demonstration of Hogwarts' more eccentric enchantments, Harry said as evenly as he could manage. The armor throughout the castle sometimes moves of its own accord. Been happening for centuries, according to Hogwarts, a history. It wasn't entirely a lie, the armor did occasionally move independently, but Harry knew perfectly well that this particular suit had responded directly to his emotional state. Umbridge's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Indeed, she said, clearly not believing him but unable to prove otherwise. Well, how educational. Now, everyone return to reading Chapter 1. There will be no more discussion. The remainder of the class passed in tense silence. When the bell finally rang, Harry packed his bag quickly, hoping to escape before Umbridge could say anything else to provoke him. Remember, Mr. Potter, she called as he reached the door. 5 o'clock tomorrow. My office. Yes, Professor, Harry replied stiffly, not looking back. In the corridor, the suit of armor fell into step behind him, following at a respectful distance. That was a disaster, Hermione said quietly as they walked away from the classroom. Harry, you've got to be more careful. She was deliberately provoking you. I know, Harry sighed, running a hand through his hair in frustration. But how am I supposed to sit there and listen to her deny Voldemort's back? People need to know the truth, they need to be prepared. Of course they do, Hermione agreed, but getting detention and setting enchanted armor on her isn't going to help your credibility. I didn't set the armor on her, Harry protested. It just responded to how I was feeling. Maybe you need to practice controlling your connection to the castle, Ron suggested. Like training a dog not to bark at every passing cat. Hogwarts isn't a dog, Ron, Hermione said exasperatedly. No, but the principle's similar, isn't it? Harry needs to teach the castle when to respond and when to stay quiet. It wasn't a bad analogy, Harry had to admit. The problem is, I don't even know how to communicate with the castle properly yet. It's all just instinctive right now. Then we need to make that a priority, Hermione decided. Figuring out how you can control your connection to Hogwarts. Before the castle decides to drop a chandelier on Umbridge's head or something. Despite his frustration, Harry smiled at the image. That might be worth the detention. Harry. Hermione scolded, though her lips twitched slightly. As they turned a corner, Harry suddenly stopped, causing Ron to bump into him. What's wrong? Ron asked, steadying himself. Do you feel that? Harry asked, turning toward a blank section of wall where a faint humming sensation seemed to be emanating. Feel what? Hermione looked at the wall with confusion. Harry approached it slowly, guided by an inexplicable certainty. The Founder's ring warmed again, but comfortably this time, almost encouraging. When he placed his palm against the stone, it felt warm and seemed to vibrate slightly beneath his touch. I think this is what McGonagall was talking about, he said quietly. The space for my special studies. Following the same instinct that had guided him in the Founder's sanctum, Harry focused his intention on the wall. I need to understand my connection to Hogwarts, he thought clearly. Show me where to learn. The stone rippled beneath his hand, and an ornate door materialized where blank wall had been moments before. It was made of dark wood with intricate carvings of the 4 house animals and bore a simple bronze plaque that read Heir's Study. Bloody brilliant, Ron breathed. Harry reached for the handle, which turned easily at his touch. The door swung open to reveal a spacious, circular room that somehow reminded Harry of both the Gryffindor common room and Dumbledore's office, yet was distinctly its own space. Comfortable armchairs and sofas were arranged around a central fireplace that sprang to life as they entered. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with ancient-looking tomes. A large desk occupied one side of the room, already supplied with parchment, quills, and ink. On the opposite wall hung a tapestry showing Hogwarts Castle in extraordinary detail, seemingly alive with tiny moving figures. But what drew Harry's attention most was the object standing in the center of the room, a stone basin carved with runes and filled with a silvery substance that was neither liquid nor gas. "A pensieve," Hermione gasped, approaching it reverently. "They're incredibly rare." Beside the pensieve stood a cabinet with glass doors, revealing dozens of crystal vials containing swirling silver memories, each carefully labeled in unfamiliar handwriting. Founder memories, Harry realized, reading some of the labels. Ravenclaw, first enchantment of the Great Hall. Gryffindor, establishing the ward boundaries. Hufflepuff, creation of the kitchen network. "This is amazing," Ron said, turning in a slow circle to take in the entire room. "The castle created this just for you?" "I think it was always here," Harry replied, running his fingers along the spines of some books. "Just hidden until I needed it." Hermione had already pulled several volumes from the shelves and was examining them with growing excitement. "Harry, these are the Founder's personal grimoires. Original copies, not translations or later editions. Do you have any idea how historically significant these are?" Before Harry could respond, a flash of fire appeared above the desk, and Fawkes the Phoenix materialized, dropping a sealed letter before landing gracefully on the back of a nearby chair. "Hello, Fawkes," Harry greeted the magnificent bird, who trilled a musical note in response. The Phoenix's presence was reassuring, a reminder of Dumbledore's support despite his absence from the Great Hall earlier. The letter bore Dumbledore's elegant handwriting and was addressed simply to the heir of Hogwarts. Harry broke the seal and read aloud for Ron and Hermione's benefit. "Harry, I see you have discovered the heir's study. This room has existed since the founding but reveals itself only to those with founder blood when they are ready to begin their education in castle magic. I apologize for my absence at lunch. The minister summoned me to an emergency meeting regarding your inheritance claim. As expected, the ministry is attempting to assert control through legal maneuvering. Do not be concerned, they cannot override founder magic, though they may create temporary inconveniences. Professor Umbridge will likely attempt to provoke you into actions that could be used to discredit your claim. Exercise caution in her presence. The memories in the pensieve cabinet will prove invaluable in understanding your connection to Hogwarts. I suggest beginning with Hufflepuff, establishing the heart bond, and Gryffindor, communicating with the castle consciousness. Fawkes will find me should you need to communicate urgently. ADPS. The castle has informed me that the armor in the defense classroom was acting on its own initiative, not yours. An important distinction I will ensure is documented. How does the castle inform Dumbledore of anything? Ron wondered, looking around as if the walls might answer. The headmaster's office must have a connection to the castle's consciousness, Hermione speculated. Though clearly not as direct as Harry's. Harry approached the pensieve cabinet, locating the memories Dumbledore had recommended. I think it's time I learned more about this heir business, he said, carefully removing the vial labeled Hufflepuff, establishing the heart bond. Should we give you privacy? Hermione asked hesitantly. Harry shook his head. No, I want you both with me. Whatever I'm going to face with this inheritance thing, I'll need your help. Following Dumbledore's example from the previous year, Harry poured the silvery memory into the pensieve, where it swirled enticingly. The three friends exchanged determined looks, then bent forward as one, touching their faces to the silvery surface. Harry felt the familiar sensation of falling through darkness before landing gently on his feet in a scene from the distant past, a Hogwarts still under construction, with Helga Hufflepuff standing before an enormous heartstone at what appeared to be the very center of the castle. The heart bond, Hufflepuff was explaining to unseen students, is what gives Hogwarts its consciousness. The castle becomes an extension of the heir's will, responsive to their needs and intentions. But remember, she smiled warmly, her round face kind but serious, with such a bond comes great responsibility. The castle will defend its heir instinctively, but an heir must defend the castle deliberately, with wisdom and care. As the memory unfolded before them, Harry watched intently, absorbing every detail of the Founder's instructions. Whatever challenges lay ahead with Umbridge and the Ministry, he was determined to understand his inheritance fully, not just for his own sake, but for Hogwarts itself. The castle had chosen to reveal him as its heir. Now he needed to prove worthy of that trust. The next few days passed in a blur of classes, whispers, and Harry's growing awareness of his connection to Hogwarts. After viewing the Founder memories, he began to understand the nature of the heart bond, the magical link connecting him to the castle's semi-sentient consciousness. According to Hufflepuff's memory, the castle perceived the world primarily through emotional resonance, which explained why it had reacted so strongly to Harry's feelings of anger and frustration in Umbridge's class. Gryffindor's memory had shown techniques for deliberate communication with Hogwarts, a form of focused intention combined with a gentle touch on any part of the castle's structure. Harry practiced whenever he could, placing his hand against a wall and projecting clear thoughts toward the magical awareness he could now consistently sense around him. The castle's responses were becoming more nuanced, a warm pulse for agreement, a cool ripple for caution, a gentle vibration for attention. Most importantly, Harry had learned to dampen the automatic defensive reactions Hogwarts displayed when he felt threatened or angry. The suit of armor stopped following him everywhere, though it remained vigilant at a distance, and the castle's more dramatic responses to his emotions became subtler. By Friday evening, as Harry prepared for his detention with Umbridge, he felt more confident in his ability to maintain control over the heart bond, even under provocation. "Just keep calm," Hermione advised as they sat in the Gryffindor common room. "She's going to try to make you lose your temper again." "I know," Harry sighed. "I've been practicing the techniques from Gryffindor's memory, focusing on intent rather than emotion when communicating with the castle." "I still think you should let Hogwarts turn her into a toad," Ron grumbled. "It wouldn't be much of a transformation, really." "Ron!" Hermione admonished, though without much conviction. Harry smiled faintly as he gathered his things. "I'd better go. Don't want to give her an excuse to extend the detention." As he made his way to Umbridge's office, Harry noticed something unusual. The corridors seemed to be subtly rearranging themselves to create the most direct path possible. Staircases aligned perfectly as he approached them, doors opened of their own accord, and even the distance between points seemed to compress slightly. What should have been a 10-minute walk took barely 4. "Thank you," Harry thought appreciatively, touching a wall briefly. The stone warmed beneath his palm in acknowledgement. Umbridge's office, when he arrived, proved to be a shock to the senses. Every surface had been draped in lacy covers and cloths. Several vases of dried flowers stood on doilies, and an entire wall was covered with ornamental plates, each featuring a garishly painted kitten wearing a different bow around its neck. "Good evening, Mr. Potter," Umbridge said sweetly from behind her desk. "Evening, Professor," Harry replied neutrally, determined not to give her any ammunition. "Well, sit down," she indicated a small table draped in lace, upon which lay a piece of blank parchment. Harry sat down cautiously, eyeing the parchment with suspicion. "You're going to be doing some lines for me, Mr. Potter," Umbridge said, handing him a long, thin black quill with an unusually sharp point. "I want you to write, 'I must not tell lies.'" "How many times?" Harry asked, taking the quill but not yet touching it to the parchment. "Oh, as long as it takes for the message to sink in," Umbridge replied with a smile that chilled Harry. "You won't need ink." Warning bells rang in Harry's mind, but he carefully controlled his expression as he placed the quill tip against the parchment and wrote, "I must not tell lies." The words appeared on the page in shining red ink, and simultaneously, Harry felt a sharp pain on the back of his hand. He looked down to see the same words cut into his skin, as if traced by a scalpel. Even as he watched, the cuts healed over, leaving the skin slightly redder than before. "Yes," Umbridge said softly, seeing him pause. Harry looked up at her, understanding dawning. The quill was using his own blood as ink, carving the message into his hand. "Nothing," he said quietly, determined not to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. "That's right," Umbridge said, smiling widely. "Because deep down, you know you deserve to be punished, don't you? Now, keep writing." As Harry began to write again, feeling the cut reopen with each line, he noticed something strange. The Founder's ring on his finger was growing warm, and the wounds on his hand seemed to be healing faster than they should. By the 5th line, the cuts were barely visible before they closed. Umbridge, watching closely, frowned at his hand. "Is something the matter with the quill, Mr. Potter?" "No, Professor," Harry replied innocently. "It seems to be working as intended." He continued writing, the pain sharp but fleeting as the castle's magic worked to heal him almost instantly. After 20 lines, his hand showed only the faintest redness, with no lasting marks. Umbridge's expression grew increasingly pinched as she observed the ineffectiveness of her punishment. Finally, she stood abruptly and crossed to examine his hand. "This is most irregular," she said, her sweet voice undercut by clear frustration. "The disciplinary quill should leave a more lasting impression." "Perhaps it's defective," Harry suggested mildly. Umbridge's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Or perhaps, Mr. Potter, you are employing some form of magical interference. Healing charms during detention would constitute further rule-breaking." "I haven't cast any spells, Professor," Harry replied truthfully. It wasn't his magic healing him, but Hogwarts' own. "Indeed." Umbridge didn't sound convinced. She returned to her desk and retrieved another quill, identical to the first. "Try this one instead." Harry accepted the replacement and began writing again. This time, the cuts were deeper and more painful, but the healing effect remained, the wounds closing almost as quickly as they appeared. After observing this for several minutes, Umbridge's false sweetness finally cracked. "Enough," she snapped, snatching the quill away. "It seems alternative disciplinary measures will be required in your case, Mr. Potter." She paced before him, her squat form quivering with poorly suppressed rage. "Perhaps you think your supposed status as heir places you above school discipline? Above ministry authority?" "No, Professor," Harry replied evenly. "I'm just serving my detention as instructed." "With some form of magical protection," she accused. "No student resists the disciplinary quill, no one." As her voice rose, Harry felt the castle's magic stir around them. The ornamental plates on the wall began to rattle slightly, and the pink curtains over the window fluttered despite the absence of a breeze. Focusing on his intent rather than his emotions, Harry silently communicated with the castle, calm. "No interference needed. I'm fine." The rattling subsided, though Harry could still sense Hogwarts' attention focused on Umbridge like a predator watching potential prey. "I'm not resisting anything, Professor," Harry said calmly. "I've written the lines as you instructed. If the quill isn't working as expected, that's hardly my fault." Umbridge's face had turned an interesting shade of pink that clashed horribly with her cardigan. "You may go, Mr. Potter," she said finally, her voice tight with suppressed fury. "But rest assured, this matter isn't concluded." "Will I need to return tomorrow for another detention?" Harry asked, careful to keep any hint of satisfaction from his voice. "Not at present," Umbridge replied coldly. "I'll inform you when I've adjusted the parameters of your punishment." As Harry left her office, he couldn't help but place his palm against the corridor wall, sending a wave of gratitude toward the castle consciousness. "Thank you for protecting me," he thought clearly. The stone warmed beneath his touch, and for a brief moment, Harry thought he heard a faint, musical hum, almost like laughter, echoing through the ancient walls of Hogwarts. The weekend brought torrential rain that confined most students to the castle, though Harry hardly noticed the weather. He spent hours in the heir's study, viewing founder memories and practicing his communication with Hogwarts under Ron and Hermione's watchful eyes. "It's amazing how quickly you're learning this," Hermione observed on Sunday afternoon as Harry successfully directed the room to reconfigure its furniture arrangement through focused intention alone. The founder memories suggest it usually takes months to establish this level of control. The castle's been waiting a long time for its heir, Harry replied, repeating Luna's words from their arrival. I think it's eager to connect. Well, it's bloody useful, Ron commented, sprawled comfortably in an armchair that had adjusted perfectly to his lanky frame. Imagine what you could do with this in a real emergency. Harry had been thinking the same thing. The more he learned about Hogwarts' capabilities, the more he understood why control of the castle was so politically significant. In the wrong hands, the heart bond could turn Hogwarts from a school into a fortress, or a weapon. I'm more concerned about what Umbridge is planning next, Hermione said, closing the ancient text she'd been studying. She was using a blood quill on you, Harry. Those are classified as dark artifacts and are only legally permitted for signing binding magical contracts. I know, Harry sighed. But reporting her would just give the Ministry more ammunition against me. They'd claim I was trying to undermine their representative. So we just let her torture students? Ron demanded indignantly. No, Harry said firmly. I'm going to talk to Dumbledore about it when he gets back. He's been away since Friday for another Ministry meeting. Before they could discuss it further, the door to the heir's study opened unexpectedly, admitting Professor McGonagall. Her expression was grave as she approached them. Mr. Potter, I need you to come with me immediately, she said without preamble. There's been an incident. Harry rose quickly. What's happened, Professor? A serious breach of the castle's security, McGonagall replied tersely. The headmaster is returning as we speak, but as heir, your presence is required. Ron and Hermione stood as well, but McGonagall shook her head. Just Potter, for now. This is a matter for the castle's heir and administration only. As Harry followed McGonagall through corridors that seemed to shorten before them, the castle facilitating their rapid movement, he reached out with his awareness, trying to sense what had happened. There was a disturbed quality to Hogwarts magic, a ripple of unease that permeated the stones around them. Professor, what kind of security breach? Harry asked as they descended a staircase he didn't recognize. Someone has attempted to access one of the Founder chambers, specifically, Slytherin's private study, McGonagall explained grimly. The wards were partially dismantled before the castle's defenses activated. Slytherin's study? I didn't even know that existed. Few do. It's been sealed since the founding, accessible only to Slytherin's true heir. McGonagall gave him a significant look. Which makes this attempt particularly concerning. The implications were clear: if Voldemort was Slytherin's heir, and he wasn't behind this break-in attempt, then who was? They arrived at a section of the dungeons Harry had never visited before, older and deeper than even the potions classroom area. The walls here were rough-hewn stone, illuminated by torches that burned with an eerie green flame. Professor Snape was waiting for them, along with the tiny form of Professor Flitwick, both examining an ornate door carved with serpentine patterns. The door itself appeared intact, but the wall around it showed scorch marks and what looked like claw gouges. Minerva, Potter, Snape acknowledged them curtly. The headmaster is on his way. What happened here? Harry asked, approaching the door cautiously. As he drew nearer, the Founder's ring heated on his finger, and he could feel the magical protections woven into the stone, ancient, powerful, and recently disturbed. Someone attempted to breach Salazar Slytherin's private chambers, Flitwick explained, his normally cheerful voice serious. They managed to dismantle the first layer of wards before triggering the secondary defenses. Which responded rather aggressively, Snape added, indicating the claw marks on the wall. The castle manifested physical guardians. Harry placed his palm against the wall beside the door, focusing his intention on understanding what had occurred. A series of impressions flooded his mind, a magical signature he didn't recognize, focused determination, dark magic, and then the castle's response, stone serpents emerging from the walls to attack the intruder. There was just one person, Harry said, opening his eyes. They used some kind of dark ward-breaking spell, but they weren't expecting the animated guardians. The three professors exchanged glances. Can you sense who it was, Potter? McGonagall asked. Harry shook his head. The magical signature isn't familiar to me. But they knew exactly what they were looking for, this wasn't random exploration. A flash of fire announced Dumbledore's arrival, Fawkes transporting him directly to their location. The headmaster looked unusually grave as he surveyed the damaged wall and door. "Ah, Harry, good. I was hoping you would be here," Dumbledore said, examining the serpentine door with intense focus. "What can you tell us about the intruder?" Harry repeated what he'd sensed from the castle, adding, "Hogwarts is unsettled. This is the first serious attack on its defenses in a long time." "Indeed," Dumbledore agreed. "Slytherin's chamber contains knowledge and artifacts that many would seek to possess, particularly those with an interest in certain branches of magic Salazar was known to favor." "You mean dark magic," Harry stated plainly. "Among other things," Dumbledore nodded. "More concerning is that someone within Hogwarts possesses both the knowledge to locate this chamber and the magical ability to nearly breach its protections." "Could it be a student?" McGonagall asked, looking troubled by the prospect. "Unlikely," Snape replied. "The magical signature left behind indicates considerable power and experience. This was no amateur attempt. Which leaves staff or an outside intruder," Flitwick concluded grimly. "Or both," Dumbledore said quietly. "Someone admitted to the castle who should not have been." An uncomfortable silence followed this statement, broken only when Dumbledore turned to Harry. "Harry, as heir to 3 founders, you have a unique ability to strengthen Hogwarts' defenses. The castle responded to this threat, but without direct guidance from an heir, its reactions are somewhat indiscriminate. You want me to improve the security," Harry realized. "I believe it may be necessary," Dumbledore confirmed. "The founder memories should include instructions for reinforcing the castle's ward network." With Voldemort's return and now this attempt to access Slytherin's chamber, Hogwarts faces threats it has not encountered for centuries. Harry hesitated, aware of the enormity of what Dumbledore was suggesting. Actively modifying Hogwarts' ancient defenses went far beyond the passive ownership he'd imagined when first learning of his inheritance. "This would be a significant step in assuming your role as heir," Dumbledore acknowledged, reading Harry's expression. "But these are significant times, Harry. The castle has recognized you for a reason." Before Harry could respond, a new voice interrupted their discussion, high-pitched, girlish, and immediately irritating. "What is going on here?" Dolores Umbridge demanded, bustling down the corridor toward them. "I was not informed of any security incident." "Professor Umbridge," Dumbledore greeted her calmly. "How did you learn of our presence in this section of the dungeons?" "I have been appointed High Inquisitor by the Ministry," she replied, drawing herself up importantly. "It is my responsibility to be aware of all significant events within Hogwarts, particularly those involving security." Her gaze fell on the damaged wall and serpentine door, and her eyes widened slightly before her expression turned calculating. "An attempted break-in? This should have been reported to me immediately. As representative of the Ministry, I must insist on full details for my report to the Minister." "Of course," Dumbledore agreed pleasantly. "Though I should note that internal security matters at Hogwarts traditionally fall under the headmaster's purview, not the Ministry's." "Traditions change, Headmaster," Umbridge replied with a tight smile. "Particularly when security failures occur." Her gaze shifted to Harry, and her smile widened unpleasantly. "Ah, Mr. Potter. How interesting to find you at the center of another, unusual event." "Mr. Potter is here at my request," McGonagall stated firmly. "As heir to 3 founders, his insight into the castle's defenses is invaluable." "Yes, this claimed heir status," Umbridge said dismissively. "A matter still under Ministry review, as you know. Until that review is complete, Mr. Potter has no official role in castle security." Harry felt a surge of irritation, which he carefully controlled before it could trigger a response from Hogwarts. The last thing they needed was for the castle to demonstrate its loyalty to him by ejecting Umbridge from the dungeons, satisfying as that might be. "Perhaps," Harry said carefully, this incident demonstrates why the founder inheritance is important, Professor. Hogwarts has its own ancient defenses that respond to threats independently of ministry regulations. Umbridge's eyes narrowed at his measured tone. Are you suggesting, Mr. Potter, that the ministry cannot adequately secure a school? I'm suggesting that Hogwarts is more than just a building, Harry replied. It's a magical entity created by 4 of the most powerful witches and wizards in British history. Its defenses are part of that creation. Eloquently put, Harry, Dumbledore interjected before Umbridge could respond. Now, as this matter concerns founder magic rather than standard security protocols, I believe we should continue our assessment without further delay. It was a polite but clear dismissal. Umbridge, however, stood her ground. As High Inquisitor, I must insist on observing all proceedings related to this incident, she declared. The Ministry takes breaches of school security very seriously, especially given recent disruptions to the established order. The standoff might have continued indefinitely had the castle itself not intervened. Without warning, the torches in the corridor flickered, then extinguished completely, plunging them into darkness. Before anyone could react, a single torch near Harry reignited with brilliant green flame, illuminating only him and the serpentine door. A low hissing sound emerged from the stone serpents carved around the doorframe, not Parseltongue, but the sound of stone grinding against stone as the carvings began to move, turning their heads to face Umbridge with glittering, emerald eyes. What is happening? Umbridge demanded, her voice rising an octave in alarm. Dumbledore, control your castle at once. I'm afraid Hogwarts doesn't answer to me in matters of founder magic, Dumbledore replied calmly from the darkness. Harry. Understanding immediately, Harry placed his hand against the door, feeling the castle's intent flowing through the ancient wood. Stand down, he communicated clearly. She's not a threat, just an annoyance. The serpents ceased their movement, though their emerald eyes remained fixed on Umbridge. The torches slowly reignited, returning light to the corridor. It seems, Dumbledore observed mildly, that Hogwarts considers this area under the heir's authority, not the Ministry's. Most enlightening. Umbridge's face had paled considerably, but her expression quickly hardened into one of bureaucratic determination. This display changes nothing legally. The Ministry's review of Mr. Potter's claim continues, and until completed, any exercise of supposed heir authority will be documented as potential violations of Educational Decree No. 76. With that parting threat, she turned and marched back down the corridor, her posture rigid with indignation. When she was safely out of earshot, Professor Flitwick let out a low whistle. The castle certainly made its position clear. Too clear, perhaps, Snape observed darkly. Antagonizing the Ministry's representative may be satisfying in the moment, but it will have consequences. Indeed it will, Dumbledore agreed. Which is why we must act quickly to secure Hogwarts properly, before those consequences arrive. He turned to Harry with grave intensity. Harry, I believe it is time for you to consider performing at least a partial awakening of the castle's defenses. The awakening ceremony? Harry asked, alarmed. But you said that was something to approach carefully, after proper preparation. A full awakening, yes, Dumbledore nodded. That would restore all of Hogwarts' original magical capabilities and require significant preparation. But a focused awakening of just the defensive systems, that could be accomplished more immediately, with less risk. The founder memories mention something called the Shield Ascension, McGonagall added. A subset of the full awakening specifically for times of threat. Harry thought of the artifacts in his pouch, the ceremonial wand, cup, and diadem, tools meant for the heir to connect fully with Hogwarts magic. The prospect of using them for even a partial awakening was daunting. What exactly would happen if I did this Shield Ascension? He asked. According to historical accounts, Flitwick replied, the castle's protective enchantments would be significantly strengthened. Unauthorized entry would become virtually impossible. Threats within the walls would be identified and contained automatically. And the Ministry? Umbridge? Would have significantly less influence over Hogwarts' operation, Dumbledore acknowledged. Which is, I suspect, why the Ministry has been so determined to discredit your inheritance claim before you could establish a strong connection with the castle. The implications were staggering. If Harry performed even this partial awakening, he would be directly challenging the Ministry's authority over Hogwarts, essentially declaring the castle's independence from government control. I need time to think about this, he said finally. It's a huge step. Of course, Dumbledore agreed. But I fear time may be a luxury we cannot afford. Whoever attempted to breach Slytherin's chamber may try again, perhaps with greater preparation. And the Ministry will undoubtedly accelerate their efforts to assert control now that Umbridge has witnessed the castle's recognition of your authority. As if to emphasize his point, a distant tremor ran through the castle, subtle, but unmistakable to Harry's heightened awareness of Hogwarts magic. What was that? He asked, alarmed. The wards at the edge of the grounds, Dumbledore replied, his expression grave. Someone is testing them, probing for weaknesses. Death Eaters? McGonagall asked sharply. Perhaps, Dumbledore said. Or perhaps the Ministry, assessing Hogwarts' defenses for their own purposes. Either possibility was disturbing. Harry placed his hand against the wall again, extending his awareness outward toward the boundaries of the grounds. He could feel the ancient protective magic straining against some external pressure, not yet breached, but under stress. The castle was vulnerable. As heir to 3 founders, Harry had the power to change that. I'll do it, he decided, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. The Shield Ascension. But I need to prepare first, study the relevant memories, understand exactly what I'm doing. Wise caution, Dumbledore approved. The heir's study should contain everything you need. Perhaps tomorrow evening would be suitable. That should give you adequate time to prepare while not delaying unnecessarily. Harry nodded, his heart racing at the thought of what he was agreeing to. This went far beyond anything he had anticipated when learning of his inheritance. He wasn't just claiming a title or legal ownership, he was assuming an active role in Hogwarts' defense and governance. As they left the ancient corridor, the serpentine door seemed to watch Harry's departure, its carved guardian still vigilant. The Founder's ring pulsed warmly on his finger, as if in encouragement or anticipation. Tomorrow evening, Harry would take his first real step as heir of Hogwarts. The castle had been waiting centuries for this moment, but Harry couldn't help wondering if he was truly ready for what would follow. Chapter 3, A New Hogwarts. Harry implements his vision while balancing power with reconciliation with key figures who opposed him. Discovery of the Founder's original vision for the school. Harry establishes new governance for Hogwarts that will outlast him. Final confrontation with those who can't accept change. Epilogue showing the long-term impact of Harry's inheritance. Now that I have a general outline, I'll start drafting Chapter 1. The focus will be on natural dialogue, varied pacing, and showing rather than telling. I'll avoid info dumps and focus on character development through action and dialogue. I'll wait for the human to prompt me to write Chapter 1 before proceeding. The Heir of Hogwarts, story outline. Plot overview. When Harry Potter undergoes a routine financial consultation with Griphook at Gringotts, a chance magical inheritance test reveals shocking news. Harry is the hereditary owner of 60% of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, including Dumbledore's office. This discovery upends the power structure of magical Britain's most important institution and thrusts Harry into a position of unexpected authority. As he navigates this newfound responsibility, Harry must confront centuries of hidden history, challenge entrenched bureaucracy, and decide what kind of leader he wants to become, all while battling those who prefer the status quo. Themes: inheritance and legacy. Beyond gold and heirlooms, the true meaning of ownership and stewardship. Power and its responsible application. Institutional reform versus tradition. The Founder's original vision for magical education. Trust, manipulation, and transparency. Character arcs. Harry Potter evolves from reluctant heir to visionary reformer as he connects with Hogwarts on a magical level never before seen. His journey involves battling self-doubt, resisting corruption, and finding his authentic leadership style. Griphook, the goblin banker with complex motivations who reveals Harry's inheritance, hoping to restore ancient goblin-wizard partnerships while pursuing his own agenda. Albus Dumbledore, forced to confront his paternalistic leadership style and past secrets as his authority is legally challenged by Harry. His arc involves painful growth from resistance to acceptance. Hermione Granger, transforms from rule follower to constitutional architect as she helps Harry understand the legal and historical implications of his inheritance while keeping him grounded. Ron Weasley, struggles with envy before becoming Harry's most loyal advocate and strategic advisor, offering crucial perspective from wizarding traditions and helping bridge divides. Minerva McGonagall, initially torn between institutional loyalty and recognition of needed changes, ultimately becomes a key ally in Hogwarts' transformation. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.